Hello, everybody, and welcome to Off the Rip, first official broadcast back. We did one of these a couple of weeks ago, talking over challengers and what we might think that would be great to see for the scene. But now we're going to talk a little bit more about the beta. And while we're trying to do this every single week as best as possible, today on the show, of course, as you see it listed, three relatively handsome men. I can't speak so much for Nick down there as he's trying to cover up his personality and his looks as best as humanly possible.
That's the look for this. That's the look for quarantine.
Hey, you gotta do what you gotta do. Well, it's funny because last that we talked, like, you were like really embracing the quarantine look, and I feel like you've actually cleaned up your act a little bit since then. But I hesitate
not necessarily.
To even say
if I took off the hat right now, you'd be petrified of the haircut. Like, I have not gotten a haircut in months. I'm actually probably going to later today.
Why are we not seeing it right now? I guess is what.
No, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do this, Alan. We're not doing this.
Well, let's go ahead and just run down the list in case you don't know any of these guys. Directly to my left is the EU wonder child himself, TacticalRab. I don't know. I just made that up on the spot, Rab. I don't know why I said that, but
I'll take that. Like,
how are you, man? Welcome to the show, dude. Good to have you on for the first time.
Yeah, doing good, man. It's been a crazy time as of late. Been busy, back at uni, lots of stuff going on. Breaking Point. You know, slow couple of news weeks, but it's always been fun on the channel. Got some new content we're trying to push out. Yeah, it's been a hectic time.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta actually ask both you and Nick about Breaking Point a little bit more, because obviously you guys kind of had your launch over the last week. But tell everyone like more about like what you guys are like aiming to do, because I saw like a lot of pros were like questioning like, is this supposed to be the new HLTV of COD and stuff like that? So like, tell us more about like what that is.
That is basically the end goal. Yeah, we want to create a hub for Call of Duty in a similar way to what HLTV have. Not just news, but like right now it's very difficult to access accessible statistics content, which is put together by people who know what they're doing at the highest level and can make that kind of stuff accessible. So that's definitely a goal. The other side of the content side as well, because there seems to me to be quite a lot of white space and greenfield territory to explore in terms of COD content. It's only just the CDL's only just maturing,
right?
So we felt like there was an area there, and to couple the stats with the best content and just normal news stuff and written content pieces, we felt there was an opportunity to do that, and I think we have a decent group of people together to make that happen.
VisionZz, I'm going to skip you, Nick, if you wanted to just kind of reiterate like on where the idea came from. I know you did a lot of stuff with COD Game PD. I'm sure there's some inspiration from what you did there to try to take it to the next level, maybe with Breaking Point. I know that we kind of talked about that at one point in time a while back.
Yeah, for sure. So speaking for me personally, my ultimate goal with it is to just elevate all the stuff that like the group has been doing. So obviously individually, Rab has his YouTube channel that's been excelling like crazy this year. All the stats people that we have, like Easy Mac, Brandon, RG, they're all, killing it in what they're doing as well. But more so just polishing up and going behind. We want to up the production value of like the pieces. Like, I don't know if you've seen like what Rab's been dropping, of, like,
dude,
the 3 minutes in COD history.
That video was so sick, by the way.
Yeah.
Props out to the guys that worked on that. It was such a cool video.
Yeah, that was Rab. Lion did the thumbnails, and then Round 11 helped with the editing and stuff, right, Rab?
I might help with the editing as well. Yeah, it was a duo.
I watched that and I was like,
editor coming in as well. He's gonna make some Unreal stuff. So yeah, definitely some more where that came from over the next few weeks.
Super sick.
Yeah, and then I guess just the more so main focus would be the social aspect. For those who don't know, I came from a background of I got my start doing COD Game PD. I ran the socials for like 4.5 years almost, and we want to turn like the HLTV is like a main component of what we want to do, but we also want to make Breaking Point eventually like the hub to go to for any like news you need for COD esports.
Yeah, love it. And then VisionZz, you've kind of also stepped up to your game when it comes to what you did with the Tactical Insight. That popped off immediately. And now you're doing
so
stuff.
Fire.
Yeah, dude, they're so cool, man. It's such a great idea. But of course, tell everyone about you and what you've been up to really over the last couple of months.
Yeah, I was gonna say a lot of our stuff has been done together, Alan. For as far as the content that we do, the diffuse and whatnot, a lot of casting that we've done together. Doing some the throwbacks with Hitch and stuff like that, going back and casting games that I grew up playing. That was definitely a lot of fun. And yeah, I think for as far as if you don't know exactly who I am by now, then yeah, caster in the scene, got to do some challenges work last year with the COD League. A lot of stuff within Toronto Ultra, I think, is definitely another big one. And then recently, like you said, the series with the breakdown series for Tactical Insight, I think, is definitely something really good. Just finished the last episode with Taking the Throne with Dallas Empire and got to work with Chicago Huntsmen. So it was something I think I needed to do. Alan pushed me to, get some content out there, and finally I was able to come together with something. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and I imagine you'll probably see a lot more of Alan and I doing content together as well in the future.
It's actually so cool. This was actually a group of people that I wanted to get on, like when I did the show last season, but like schedules never fully lined up, and then after that, like the show just kind of started losing traction with everything going to online. But this is like probably a collective. I mean, we're missing Salvation's Elite. I would love to have him on with this because I think that would be like an awesome bit of like the content dudes that are like always looking to push the envelope to the next level.
That'd be awesome, man.
And that's why I really wanted to get you guys on for this specific show. So things that we're talking about here today, we'll be talking about obviously a lot of things about the beta, a lot of stuff, continuing the conversation about skill-based matchmaking, and then obviously taking those things and kind of looking at what that's going to mean for the CDL and the competitive future in this 2021 season that we have. So starting things off, I kind of want to get your guys' take, just initially, just general reactions to what you guys thought over the beta. Not even just looking at like the specific breakdown things, but like day one, you just dropped in, you got your hands on the game, whether it's from the alpha or the beta this time around. What were your biggest takeaways as far as like your initial reactions in that first game?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like my biggest takeaway, I think like I touched on yesterday, was definitely the movement, right? Like moving a lot faster. As soon as you jump on towards the map, like I think like you just noticed as you were sprinting through everything, like you were just moving way quicker than you were in the alpha. And I think that's good because I think the pacing was a little bit slow. We talked a lot about how the map designs maybe have a bit of an effect on how the game is played. And I think maybe adding a little bit of extra movement towards the mix is going to speed things up a bit, especially for competitive as well. We still get to see Simp and Abizi do some of those crack things that, that the fans love to see. So that was probably my biggest takeaway. And then I think the second biggest takeaway is the movement is still a little bit OP. I think, like there has to be some kind of a timer, some kind of, delay on how fast you should be able to slide.
Shotzi out to the facility like months before and let them test the game and try to break it.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I said yesterday. I'm like, dude, get Shotzi in there, get Simp in there, like let them just play for a couple of days, and you're like, oh, this is what he's doing. This is what we need to do to fix it. So
it's funny to me just imagining like the game devs who are like probably in their late 30s, 40s, like just trying to slide cancel and trying to like try to break their game. Like leave that to the professionals.
For sure.
Yeah, sure.
Brad, what was your takes, man?
Interesting. Yeah, so I didn't actually get a chance to play the beta, but I played the alpha a fair bit. And I guess my first takeaway is I've always been a massive fanboy for Treyarch games, like just straight up. Like if I want to list like my favorite CODs of all time, at least the top 3 are Treyarch games. Probably all of the first 3 Black Ops is, and then maybe Black Ops 4 is a little bit further down the pile, but in some order or another. And yeah, I mean, it just hopping into the game and using the guns just feels so good compared to the last couple of CODs, in my opinion. And my first takeaway, frankly, was that the first lobbies I was getting in were absolute garbage. Like these kids were getting smoked.
You were feeling good.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, I was feeling good for the first, like, I don't know, few hours. And then as the night went on, it began to get more challenging. So, that's just kind of how it is. But my initial impressions were great. I mean, honestly, like people like the Miami map was the map I first played on. And maybe it was just I had a nice first impression because the enemies weren't very good. But I honestly thought that map had more, I don't know, more potential than, because immediately I'm thinking from a competitive perspective when I hop into any map. And I don't know, I thought it had more potential for search, for example, than maybe some people are giving it credit for. So initially I didn't have I had a pretty good first impression.
Yeah, I was kind of in the same boat. I think I was most excited just to, obviously I think a lot of us were excited to get away from what we had in Modern Warfare after seeing the same maps and modes every single time, not being able to play anything besides like the CDL playlist or like Shoot House 24/7 type things. But beyond that, I was interested, I think, to see how they were going to try to incorporate the game off of what was essentially like a skeleton from Black Ops 4, because I mean Treyarch only had like a year and a half to make this game, right? So like I was very cautiously optimistic about it because, like you said, Rab, it's a Treyarch game again. The first game that I had played in a long time was Black Ops 4. I had a blast with it, grinded the literal hell out of it, and was excited to see if they were going to be able to kind of like bring in a lot of the core factors of why that game was fun. And yeah, it definitely felt like it was more related to like Modern Warfare than Black Ops 4, but there were a lot of things that I felt were very parallel to like what we kind of knew from Black Ops 4 when it comes to like the movement, the time to kill. Definitely lent more towards that. But I will say, like, after the beta came to a conclusion, or I guess like in the middle of the beta, like I was starting to get really, really frustrated. I think mostly because of the fact that we're playing just kill-based game modes for the most part, like kill confirm TDM. You get just a lot of people who just put down a field mic and camp in a corner. I was playing with one of the guys from the CCL. I was playing with Marco the other night, and we were playing the 12v12 on Cartel, and there was a guy sitting on top of a field mic with a knife in a corner between two rocks and just waiting for people to run past and then
that
just
dude's
knife.
sole objective is just to
And
run
I'm
knights.
just like, come on, man, this isn't fun. I hate this. But I did eventually get around to thinking that, you know, like kind of like what you were saying, Rab, when it comes down to like trying to look at the maps in a more general way, like, okay, well, this is where some hard points would be. This is how the map might be able to flow. I really started to feel it, but yeah, VisionZz will say flat out, we were playing like day 2. I was just in a blender, dude. I was in a blender for sure.
When Alan doesn't talk while playing, that's so you know things are not going good. Right? Like
he gets silent.
It was not good, but it was a regame the day after, I think, for him for sure.
Dude,
I guess
too funny.
to speak for me personally, I guess to list like one positive, one negative to like go off that tweet that Vaughn came out with a couple days ago. Like how I went into the alpha and beta looking at it was I'm a player that like I haven't played pubs like religiously in a COD since like AAW. So I'm looking at like what's gonna be good for this game competitively. How's this game gonna like benefit our scene and then as well like the news, like they wouldn't comment on if there was going to be a ranked mode, but they said like, have you known like a Black Ops without one? So
Right. That's true.
that obviously I went into it like kind of happy with that already. But in terms of just like the base game, I feel like we're gonna have a much better year than we had last year. Like I tweeted, I think my first game after the alpha, like this already feels better than Modern Warfare. Like I've already had more fun than I had the last 6 months or something.
Agreed.
I feel like weapon balancing, they did a decent job from the alpha
right there.
from alpha to
Absolutely
beta.
agree.
Like that, the 74U. I don't know if that was just because it was like everyone didn't have everything unlocked. Like I didn't even get to the level. I didn't play that much to get to a level to get the 74U, but like I wasn't getting melted by rarely anything that often. The maps were a big concern for me. That was like my biggest like takeaway for like negative. It's not that they just like were like MW level bad, but there were a lot of points in the map that felt like they were just unnecessary. There were a lot of like back end routes that you could take. Well, I forgot what the map name is. It's the like jungle map they added to the core like 6v6
Cartel.
Yeah, Cartel. So there's like the warehouse you can go to and that back entrance to go through. It feels like it's just no man's land, but there's always at least 1 or 2 dudes camping back there throwing off the flow of a 6v6 map.
The thing about that part of the map, though, that I'll say is like that back of the hangar would make for a really good bomb site, I think. Kind of like how Piccadilly B looked like, where it was like kind of back tucked in that street that regardless, like if you played like a public map, you just never were back there. It kind of felt like that, where it provided an extra route to try to get to the backside of the site. But yeah, no, I'm right there with you when it comes to the maps, and I know we'll talk a lot more about that. What else did you have though, as far as that kind of pros and negatives thing?
Let me think. I feel like I'm in the minority. I like that 12v12 like ships game mode, like with the multiple different ships. I like the flow of it. It was just like
Sure.
it felt like that's the type of game mode if I were to grind pubs, I could like sit back, listen to music and just run around in. Like I'm not gonna get like super frustrated. I feel like if I'm versus playing a map like Cartel, where I'm having to run through like 6-foot high weeds to see a person.
That was the turning point for me. So like I had played nothing but 6v6 all weekend long.
Yeah.
And then Marco was like, dude, I'm only playing 12v12 and I'm having such a better time. And granted, like Marco's like, he's all about trying to snipe, so that makes more sense. But we played nothing but Armada and Cartel 12v12 for like the last 4 hours that I played. And I had so much more fun. And that's
just
the
the
thing,
pacing.
like,
It saves the pacing
of it. Absolutely. And it's just like, I felt when we were playing 6v6 that I was constantly just running to the middle of the map, hoping to get kills, and then resetting and doing it again once I died. And I didn't really necessarily feel like that as much on the 12v12 mode. And I'll say, like, Ground War for Modern Warfare was fun during the beta, but I quickly kind of put it down and didn't play it anymore.
Yeah.
But I could actually see myself going into that combined arms mode more often than not, just based on the fun that I had in that last day of the beta.
The difference between the Modern Warfare Ground War and this, I think, is because they put dedicated time into this to make it like a game mode they want people to put into, versus I feel like Modern Warfare's rendition of Ground War was like all right, it wasn't in. Was it? I don't think it was in Black Ops 4. It wasn't in one of the
No, it
previous
wasn't.
CODs that like
Yeah, I don't think it was.
people were
no.
like complaining and really wanting it. So it was more of like just like all right, give it to them because they've been bitching about it. So,
Did
but it
any
wasn't
of
actually
you,
something they put time into. I don't think to like
Did-
make unique.
yeah, did any of you guys play the VIP escort or assault by chance?
Yeah, I played it once.
No, I didn't play it.
Played it
No,
once and I didn't touch
I
it again.
avoided
Like I
it.
wanted to try it, and like I get what they were trying to do with it. Like they wanted. I think Treyarch's always been really good about adding in new game modes, right? Like you think of Hardpoint, Black Ops 2, you think of Control and Black Ops 4, and those both turned out to be competitive game modes. And I think they always try to add something different towards the mix,
Mm.
and that's what they were doing here for sure. But I think there was just like some problems where if you're random, if you're playing with a group of people and you're random was the VIP, like this dude's just like, oh man, I'm just gonna run in the middle of the map, and then he just dies. You're like, all right, I guess we lose the round. And it's like frustrating, right? So like I think that's a game mode that's really hard to play in public matches, but maybe is going to play a lot better when you have like a full team, like where it's like, okay, like you're our VIP, like you're actually now coordinating with it, and it's trying to be maybe a competitive game mode, but I don't know how that game mode's going to be successful in a public match where it's just, you know,
Yeah, it
everyone's
needs
just
to
trying to do their own
translate,
thing,
right?
right?
Like if it's
Yeah,
going
for
to be a
sure.
successful public match mode, it needs to be either easily accessible to like watch and to learn for the casual community, or it needs to be actually playable. Which, yeah, I mean, I didn't get the
Yeah.
chance to play it. Like I wasn't. So just explain how the game mode works real quick, so I understand it. Because I was picturing what was it called, Safeguard from Black Ops
That's
3.
that's what I
It's
thought.
in a way, yeah.
Yeah.
But there's like 2
player
points that you're
instead of a
guiding
robot.
the essential robot that's really like a player, I guess, to the at like to the point. So like yeah, there's like 2 helicopter points basically on the map, and they spawn, I think, like randomly round after round. Sometimes they're like really close to you, sometimes they're really far. I think it's just randomly generated. And yeah, you're just trying to guide the VIP towards the mix, and then he just has to, I think, stand on the point for 5 seconds, and then he goes up and you win the round. I think that's the gist of it essentially.
That sounds cool in theory, but yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know if it'll translate. Not this
For-
year, but you know.
For me, that feels like the game mode like Heist was from Black Ops 4. Do you guys remember that? Where it was like the
Yeah,
CS:GO
yeah, that
style
rings a
rounds
bell.
where you start
People
with
tested it out
pistols.
for the beta and then
about
never
that.
touched it
Oh,
again.
wow.
Yeah,
pretty
pretty
much.
much.
So it's interesting, I think, to see. So let's get out of just the general reactions and talk more specifically about things like the movement, weapons, the time to kill, things like that. Movement-wise, obviously, that's kind of been breaking the internet when it comes to Twitter right now, as far as people complaining about it or at least having their takes on it. Generally, I'm personally fine that there is a slide mechanic. Do I think it's a little bit too bursty when it comes to how much you get off of the slide and how much you can spam it? Absolutely. But I think if you're going to be trying to use a movement skill, or movement as a skill base, I should say, I think there needs to be more than just one option of movement. Whether that's things like drop shotting or be able to buddy hop like we had last year, something that you can essentially, maybe not officially counter, but have another option to where you're not just going in and sliding. Because for Black Ops 4, it was, the meme was slide in, I'll get your trade. Like, that seems like it's going to be very much so the case once again here this year, considering the fact of how the maps are laid out, plus the fact that sliding is
This
like
year
the
it might be
only
slide
big
in, I'll
movement.
get your assist.
Well, yeah, for sure.
You might not even die when you slide in anymore.
Yeah, if they don't
Yeah.
change it, especially that one like I keep forgetting the name of the attachment, but it was
That's
on the
the
Uzi
dust
where
stock.
Stock, right?
yeah,
Duster,
40%, dude. Like, I mean, everyone saw those clips where you just ran across the map in 10 seconds. Like, you just G slide into a slide, and like you're just covering so much ground. And again, like there's no cooldown on it. So like you just spam it, cancel, and you just canceling the slide just like you would in Modern Warfare. So like it just feels like that is just too spammy. You're just cruising through the map, like, and it's hard to track. Like when someone slides around the corner, especially like someone like Simper Shotzi, when they're sliding around the corner into
Good
like
luck,
another slide. Yeah, like good luck tracking
That's
that.
wild,
You're
no
not going
way.
to track that as the casual player.
We thought
And
stock 2 was a problem.
It's definitely a problem, right? Yeah, like this is definitely something that I trust in Treyarch to be able to fix. I think for sure going in towards the full game, but yeah, they got to just get someone out there and just let them like abuse the game, and then just like let them see like firsthand, rather than just like trying to make the fix themselves. And then like it didn't seem like anything really fixed or got fixed from the slide canceling from the alpha to the beta. It feels like.
Yeah. I think like I don't know. Like I trust Treyarch to be able to fix it and like
Agreed.
nerf it enough, so I'm not that concerned. But at the same time, I just want the sliding mechanic out of COD completely. It just physics wise does not make sense for someone who's got like 40 pounds of gear on him to just be sliding around on like grass and get ready for
Whatever
a
they want, like,
gunfight.
at any surface.
Like, give me a
it's
dolphin dive. I thought dolphin dives were so dope in
I
Black
thought it
Ops
was
2.
cool, yeah.
movement.
either a dolphin dive or a ghost slide from like Call of Duty Ghosts. Like, need one of
think-
those.
I
You
think
need
what's
to
interesting
finish
about
it and get a fatigue.
Yeah, but the ghost slide
a
like actually
fatigue
could
factor?
be abused.
Yeah,
you know?
well, no one. It felt like nobody ever used the slide in Ghost because it
No,
just you were
Because
so
you couldn't
slow.
abuse it.
But like I think
I
the
need to
difference
get around
now
the
is like
corner.
all the new players now are like looking to like see how they can abuse the mechanic like to the very best. You know what I mean? Where like in Ghost, I don't really think that was a thing back then. Like there was an actual mechanic in Ghost where you could like slide into a prone and like your
Snake
hitbox
it
would
or whatever.
like you'd
You'd
be
like
like
glide around the ground.
you can't really track it because the hitbox goes super weird. So like
Mm.
there was ways to abuse it, but no one really ever did it because I don't think people were trying to like test the limits as much compared to now in these newer Call of Duties.
Yeah, not even. I don't even want like sliding gone. Like as like yes, competitively, I feel like it would help because you wouldn't have many camera issues. But also just viewership wise, you know how annoying it was last year to watch like not to like call anyone out, but just like someone who's cracked just slide canceling nonstop on their POV whenever you're in Codcaster. It was like sometimes gave me headaches, like having to watch like a Gunrunner hardpoint and every other POV is a slide
Right.
cancel behind a wall to get into a
That's a
hardpoint.
fair
I
point.
can see that. I can see that.
Yeah, I think like one of the thoughts that I've always had, looking back to say something like Black Ops 3, is that I love it when there's some sort of movement which enables a skill gap to some degree. So like if you played Black Ops 3 pubs or Advanced Warfare pubs or Infinite Warfare pubs especially, if you knew how to use the advanced movement and wall run and wall bounce, all this kind of stuff, like you were just miles away the average kid and smoking them. But the problem is when you take that to competitive play, it then becomes ridiculous because everyone's so good at the wall running,
Yeah.
and the wall running is
Take
now
the
so
wall running. You
useful
take the
on
wall
the
running and
Unicorn
turning it
Attack,
in,
for example.
and
Yeah.
you turn it
like,
into
it's just out of
walking
control.
over fringe and sniping over the
Yeah,
buildings
exactly,
and
stuff like that. It just and
outside
like
all around payload and
yeah, like Illy's Redwoods, like
yeah,
wall
the
runs
red.
in the trees and stuff like that, and you like the Teddy Rex snipe and those
Right.
those
Dude,
sorts
these
of
the PTSD.
yeah, no, exactly right. It's crazy. So like when you take it to that level, it then just becomes ridiculous to the point where it detracts from the competitive watching experience and playing experience, I think, because it adds an
that's
element
true.
of randomness when everyone's doing this stuff. And I think it's the same thing to a lesser degree in Black Ops 4 Modern Warfare, where, and I mean, I think especially this game has the risk of that literally everyone is slide canceling so fast around corners that you just get, I mean, similar to what Nick was saying about Modern Warfare, you get a kind of unwatchable experience when the movement mechanics can be abused to that degree, and there's not like an alternative, I suppose, as you were saying, Shift. Like at least if jump shotting was viable or drop shotting was viable, and sliding into a gunfight was viable, then that'd be okay. But having only one of them means that there's less room for maneuver. It's just kind of everyone's sliding, and it's just what's the point of even being there if everyone's just going to do it every gunfight?
For me, it's one of those things that, like, I like to look at the game not just from the competitive lens, but I'm sure VisionZz, you'll probably echo this. I like to look at it from, like, how would I be able to cast this? And there's one moment in specific over the last couple of weeks that really stand out in my mind, and it was Hitch's drop shot 180 on Modern Warfare 2 on Demerc. Like, that was an incredible moment, and it was using a movement ability in a way to provide that. That takes skill, and it's the fact that it not just exists, but it's not abusable. So, like, the fact of the matter is, like, the way that I look at abusable is kind of like what you guys have said, where it's like it's happening in a spam-based fashion, where you're always seeing it. Whereas
You need it to improve your
exactly
character.
like that is how you meet the ceiling of the game, is by using that mechanic consistently. Or constantly, if you want to use that instead. But if it was to a point where sliding was somewhat punishable, it also brings in the ability to, like, when someone does slide for a kill, there is that risk and reward benefit, or at least that kind of consequence behind it, to where if it pays off, it becomes so much more enjoyable, I think, to watch and to be able to cast over, where it's not just, you have to do this to be good. I think that's kind of like the comparison that I draw when I look at things like movement in specific, because there were even moments where, like, you would see someone jump bunny hop around a corner last year in Modern Warfare where they would find a kill, like, over a piece of cover, like, midway through their bunny hop, and, like, that's awesome. Like, that's super skillful, and as, like, a spectator, you can at least appreciate the difficulty of what they just did. But when it's to a point where it's literally becoming spam and you have to do it to meet what is the quote-unquote meta of movement, it does, I think, become a bit unapproachable, I think, for viewership especially.
Yeah, the last thing I would say about movement for me personally is there's no options in this game for what you can do. It's sliding or bust because you can't
Right,
drop
right.
shot. Like it doesn't. It's too late, and latency on it is horrible. Bunny hopping in this game just doesn't feel good. Doesn't feel like MW. Personally, I don't know you guys,
Yeah, I
but
think I agree. Yeah,
like I tried to bunny hop a few times and it was not
Yeah,
flowing.
you can't do
feels
it. No.
worse.
We have no dolphin dives, so you can't do that. Like the only way you can camera or like get away from gunfight is sliding away, and then
Yep.
you have to slide right back at them is probably the best thing to do because you break the camera right again.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think that there's some kind of a product of it, and again, we could kind of take this conversation wherever, but when the maps are so littered with headies and cover and corners and stuff like that, I think that you're hitting at the point like you either hold a piece of cover or you don't and you die. It feels like, at least that's what my experience mostly was from the beta. Was I felt like 90% of my gunfights were either I was getting shot or getting kills from behind or from the side of people that were holding cover, or I was trying to push forward and 3 people were looking at me from behind cover. And the only way to
Yeah.
avoid that is by doing things like sliding, which that I think there is an argument for, like, okay, well, you have to slide to counter that. I think there are problems on both sides of the coin, though. The fact that there are so many different types of headies, windows, things of that nature, kind of like the same problem we had from Modern Warfare maps, and the fact that the only way to deal with those is to slide. So it kind of leads to a product of you either hold it or you're sliding. It's one of the two. There's really no in between, it felt like, for me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, I think I agree. Like, I really think that comes down to obviously the map design for what we have too, and I think it's just like the way the maps play out. Like, my biggest takeaway in the maps was like how we just have these very big open middle of the maps. Like, you think about
Yeah.
Miami, you think about Cartel, right? Like that's the big takeaway that I have from how the game's played compared to how we look at least other Call of Duties for as far as the maps that we have, even like Black Ops 4, like just about everything, which is about 3 lanes, and the middle of the map was just kind of just one lane. There wasn't just a bunch of like intertwining connections that you could run out to or run into and kind of finesse through the cover, finesse through the coca plants or all the cars in the middle of Miami or whatever it is, right? So like that was probably the biggest thing. Like Moscow's the only one that has kind of like a enclosed middle of the map, but everything's just outside, so everything just has this giant, I don't know, kind of approach
Feels
to
like a
it for as
funnel.
far as
Everything felt like a
yeah,
funnel.
it's so weird. So I think that's why like we have people like posting up and really playing a lot safer right now. But also like I think like there's a lot to consider for as far as like the beta. Like everyone that's playing in the beta right now, are people that pre-ordered the game. So like they're more dedicated Call of Duty fans. It means that they're likely going to be probably the average or above average, I think, Call of Duty fans that are playing the game rather than maybe just the casual fan that's going to buy the game and play for half an hour, every couple days. I think that's like the other big takeaway for as far as there's a lot of sweaties, whatever you want to call it, right? Like playing the game right now for as far as, every single lobby. And that's why I think, skill-based matchmaking is also playing a factor, but the maps are a little bit concerning for as far as the design, I think, for their approach going into it.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's the number one concern that I have. Just looking back at previous betas and the maps that we had in those betas and how that translated into competitive, like let's just say they tend to put pretty good maps in the betas. Like I was thinking about Black Ops 3.
Yeah, for
We had
sure.
Evac, we had Hunted, we had Combine, and they added Stronghold. Infinite Warfare had Frontier that was never played. It had Precinct that came in late, which was played. It had Throwback was in the beta as well. And I don't know, like there were some decent maps that were played in the beta. Gibraltar and another actually decent one from World War II was in the beta as well. Ardennes Forest. So
yeah, that's right. That's right.
So yeah. So I'm just looking
Also,
back and thinking.
Yeah. Also, they're remastering the exact same Treyarch maps they did in Black Ops 4, like
Oh,
the
yeah.
Jungle, Slums, Summit. So there's like instead of getting like a raid or standoff, like we get the same things.
I'm actually okay with that, though, because we could see Slums and Summit become competitive maps in 4v4. I mean, that's kind of my reaction.
I don't know
too,
what
is
this, but the difference is this has a sliding base movement. Black Ops 2 had a
That's-
dolphin dive, so the pacing of the
true.
map's going to be completely different.
Yeah, sad to see, man. Just bring back Black Ops 2. That's all
No, I mean,
I don't know where Rab stands.
the biggest gripe that I had, and I think my biggest concern, taking what we've seen and what we go forward, is even beyond that. Black Ops 4, we had a lot of what we ended up seeing in the competitive playlist was in the beta, with like the only exception being like Contraband, I think, was in the mix, and that was like the only one that we didn't have. And then last year we had Hackney Yard, Azir Cave, Gunrunner. All 3 of those became competitive maps, and that map set even got dwindled after the initial competitive rule set was announced. Like, people didn't want to play Hackney Yard, Search and Destroy, and Arklov Peak
Zero
Hardpoint.
Cave Hardpoint.
Yeah, well, Zero Cave Search and Destroy, I think, was also on the mix and the list initially. And
Yeah, I think it was.
my biggest fear is, like, if we get, let's just say 75% of the maps. That's, like, been essentially around the trend. When we get the beta, usually about 75% of those maps, depending on the game title, would end up becoming competitive maps. That means that we're going to get 3 of the 4 between Cartel, Satellite, Moscow, and Miami.
Which I think is okay. I can see it.
Really? I don't
I can
think
see
that's
Miami.
okay.
Miami is S&D. Miami is S&D. Moscow can be a hard point, I feel like, with the way.
Moscow can be
Oh,
anything.
100%.
Yeah,
It
Moscow
could
could be that.
anything. That's
Yeah,
the
Moscow
only
would be
map
a
that I
control
can-
probably.
Yeah.
Satellite I could see as a hard point.
No way. No way.
You don't think
Satellite's
so?
Weird,
No
bro.
way, dude. Do you remember where the
That's the
hard
one
points
map.
were?
What about
for
S&D?
Satellite?
What about
Like-
S&D?
Maybe, but it's just like you have 75% of the map where you can essentially
man.
nade from spawn to spawn or snipe from spawn to spawn.
Yeah, I think spawns need tweaking. They need to spawn in that bottom cave, and then the other team needs to spawn like north
Well,
of
I
the
mean,
dunes.
even if they don't, it's the fact that you could snipe and nade across the map.
Yeah,
That's
I
just
felt like I
Uh,
was playing Star Wars Battlefront. Like, on
that exactly
Dude.
what I thought.
look. I said
like,
it on the
this is a
diffuse
club map?
yesterday, but
What?
if I have to sit and cast this entire year on Satellite, I will be begging to see more Hackney Yard. Like, Hackney Yard would seem like a
Yeah.
vacation, man. Like, I just can't see it because you got to remember, like, for Satellite, the hard points were in only 4 central locations. You had the one that was out in the dunes, one inside the actual plane, and then one essentially in front of each spawn. Neither of them felt
Yeah.
all that great to play around.
I feel
those
like
parts of the map.
I still feel like we're gonna see 3 of these 4. You're gonna see like at least 2 of them as an S&D map, and then Moscow
I disagree.
as a do-it-all map.
I hope
I
we
don't know.
don't. That's a lot.
Because I feel like they're gonna try to push Cartel as S&D map.
The thing about Cartel is if you get rid of the coca plants and you get rid of the sniper tower, you've actually got a map that would actually work on every single
Yes,
mode.
and if
in
you
my
put
opinion.
if you put a bomb in that hangar, and then one down by like the hill
river?
that goes down into the
Mhm.
river,
Agreed.
like it could be,
And-
it could work.
And I don't know, did any of you guys get a chance to play the 12v12 on Cartel?
No,
I did,
not on
yeah, and it
Cartel.
felt really good.
It
Like, it
felt-
felt like a good 12v5 or 12v12 map.
And,
Rather.
and that's the thing is, like, not only is that a map that now we're considering as a 4v4 competitive map that has 12v12 potentials on it because of how large it is, but the positive I will say is where the domination points were for 12v12 felt like all very good spots for hard points.
Yeah,
Outside of the one in the middle,
I would-
because that's just chaos. With
I
all
would
the
just
coca plants
counter.
that are there.
I would just counter with that Arklov Peak could have been a ground war
I
map.
was just about to mention that
Yeah.
So
because like people talked about how you could trim Arklov Peak and make it a good hardpoint map, which actually could have worked. Like
you cut off
And if the
2-5 and like
spawns were a
cut
bit
off,
more
like,
and you'll
proximal
be
to like
golden.
where the hard points were, it could have been okay. But the fact that you had to
Right.
rotate immediately from 2 to get to
Yeah, 50
5
seconds.
was
those
crazy.
insta rotate at 55.
Yeah, you had to
it's
rotate
crazy,
like a minute
crazy.
early
You
just
get
to
one-
get there,
one
and
attempt
then
to
lose
break.
the battle. And you lose the battle too, and
Yeah,
then you're
and then
like,
you
oh,
spawn-
well,
and then
I
you
guess
spawn
we
a
lose
goal,
the
and you're like,
spawns for
well,
it.
Yeah. That was, I think, like, again, like, Arklov Peak was, like you guys mentioned, there was so much excess to the map. You could have trimmed away 60% of it, and it would have been a great map still. For
Agreed,
both
yeah.
modes, for Search and Destroy and I think for Hardpoint. But
Yeah.
the thing beyond it is the fact that, like, and this is maybe a different conversation point, we're getting a bit off topic with it, but the way that Call of Duty has gone since Modern Warfare is the fact that they want to build more immersive environments, it feels like, and take away from, like, the video game toy aspect. Like, that's the thing, like, with Miami specifically. Like, do you need that giant beachfront? No. But would it really be Miami without a beach on it? No. So I feel like they're just playing more to the map set of, like, what is the map aesthetic more than it is this map actually enjoyable to play, especially for our lens, which is the competitive side of things.
Mm-hmm.
Tell you
take
what,
it-
that just sparked a thought real quick. There was just this Black Ops 3 DLC map called Splash. Do you remember it? It was like a theme
Yeah.
park, had the pirate ship. There was a beach on that, and they just fenced it off. You couldn't go in the sea. Like it was like it was a nice beach, but this is the end of the map, and this is where you're going to behave. Like, whereas in this game, it's kind of like, oh, you could just wade out into the sea and stuff. You
Yeah.
know? I
Right.
agree with you in that
The-
sense.
I would say, speaking for competitively, I wouldn't be too concerned about like those aspects of the map because we've seen for like the past couple years, like these giant maps, like players find the routes that work and then never touch the other parts of the map for
Right, we
what
saw
it's
that on
worth. Like,
Sovereign with Ghost.
we
That was the
never
one that
like
reached us out
to,
me.
to go back to Peak because it's just the best example from last year. Like we
Right.
never saw a person go over by the silos in the farm, like or any of that in the back area, and like you never saw
never heard
anyone
of
out the back outside rocks
Out in the
besides like
front.
to watch field.
Right.
But other than that, like those maps never got touched. So if there are those like I would say for like a map like Cartel, that riverside, like the back part, to go up like behind the buildings. I'm not sure like what area it's called.
Oh, like
It's on
over
the
by like the
opposite side.
garage, like the bigger trees that are
Yeah,
back
yeah, yeah.
there. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Like I didn't have a single gunfight over there, so I don't think that area of the map's gonna like be a big like issue if like S&D is like a map on that.
It's just for me, it's just the fact that you are putting everything into the center of the map, and the center of Cartel is completely unplayable.
Yeah, it's
With the
just
coca
like
plants, and the
7 foot
sniper
tall
tower that's
plants.
there, it's just again, you take all that stuff away, you've got some pretty good ideas for cover with like the stacked up cocaine packages or whatever it is. Like
Yeah.
that's enough, I think, to like
Or
get
like a
some good
broken
mid-range
car and
gunfights.
a bomb site there for some
Absolutely.
cover, and you'll
Yeah.
be golden.
Yeah. So I mean, I would like to see that, but my biggest concern is that we're not going to see maps that are totally geared for 4v4. Like even Moscow is going to feel giant for 4v4, even if it is on a rotational based game mode on respawn like Control or Hardpoint. It's still going to feel massive. And I think the same things would occur again. And my biggest takeaway was, and I've pitched this a couple of times to different people, so you may have already heard me say this, but for me, it's just, you can almost feel like this game was built with the intention that the CDL was going to go into 5v5 again.
Yeah, I assume it was because this was a Hex or whatever his podcast, the duo, Energy Duo,
Yeah.
that said like they was very like they just went to individual owners and like asked what their thoughts and then used that as a vote instead of having like an overall thing. So I would assume the CDL just went to them and did that, and then like told Treyarch after the fact, like after they already had developed probably majority of the game.
And that's what I'm wondering,
100%.
because when I had heard that things were going to 4v4, it was like right around July that the conversation was starting to sprout up between a lot of the pros. So if that conversation didn't go over to Treyarch, I just don't know if they have any maps that were designed with 4v4 in mind. But the thing about it is now you're in a position to where I'm hoping they will actually, like, and I don't know what it goes into the mind of a developer, but I'm hoping that they will go in and maybe tune up the maps that they currently have to make them more approachable, because Vonderhaar has already said that competitive is going to be a thing, and competitive has to match what the esport is. So ranked will be 4v4. That has to, I think, be in mind when it comes to what maps are we going to make everybody in the game potentially play on when they queue up for ranked.
I don't know if they'll change the maps they're currently in, but my fingers are crossed that this is going to be a year that we see DLC maps added to the competitive rotation.
I'm all about
Like
that.
back like what AW did. AW had like 4 or 5 maps that were added.
I think we had one in World War II too.
Yeah, we
Valkyrie?
had one Valkyrie.
Yeah, that's right.
Detroit.
So it's not.
flipped.
What was that?
It was
Oh
like
yeah.
Advanced Warfare, right?
Mhm.
But,
Yeah.
Played nothing like it.
yeah, of course.
I don't know. I'm hopeful. I'm right there with you, Nick. I think that's my biggest takeaway, is that I hope that either as we get closer to launch or before we get to the CDL season in some fashion, there is a consideration for a map set that is more geared
Just a
towards
couple
4v4.
remastered, like
Fine with it.
be golden.
Fine with it. What'd you guys think of TTK? Just kind of the last topic before we go into like the wish list for not just beta 2 but also launch. What did you guys think of the overall time to kill? I know VisionZz, you were completely happy with it. I know that you were coming off the expectation that like Modern Warfare was way too fast. It obviously is not quite as slow as Black Ops 4. But what was your overall takeaway as far as that goes?
I honestly thought it was great. Like, it felt like if you missed bullets, you were punished, where that wasn't really the thing in Modern Warfare. It's like you just had to land a few. And if you missed, like, a couple of shots, it didn't really matter at the end of the gunfight. But this, like, you have to actually track. And that can be hard to track, I think, for as far as, obviously how the movement works. And jump shotting isn't necessarily a thing. So if you jump shot, it feels like it's easier to land your shots overall. But I honestly thought it was great. Like, it felt good. Like, I never felt like, damn, like this guy just ate like half my clip and I didn't kill him, or holy, I just melted that guy in 3 bullets, right? Like, that wasn't really the factor. I honestly thought the balance for me was fantastic, and you could still find multi kills, finessing, with the movement and still being able to come out on top. So I honestly thought it felt great, at least in my opinion.
Does anyone else feel like they sped it up from the alpha?
Yes.
Like this, like
People
the
were saying
overall
that.
movement speed.
Just
Yeah.
a touch.
Because
Or the
I felt like
time to
if
kill?
I didn't have an
Yeah.
AK in my hand in the alpha, I was putting like BB bullets into people's backs instead of like AK bullets. And like now I could have used any gun in the beta and it was like shredding. I don't know if they just buffed like the crap out of a
maybe.
bunch of weapons or they lowered the TTK.
Apparently the guns killed in the same time, but like some netcode thing made it feel quicker in the beta. I don't really know. Like
Yeah.
from what I played in the alpha, I thought the TTK was like perfect. I really enjoyed it. Felt like Black Ops 3 level TTK, to be honest. Like I wasn't I don't know. I wasn't a massive fan of Black Ops 4's TTK was fine, but in combination with the stim shot, it was
Yeah.
just
Absolutely,
disaster.
absolutely.
Dude, if Black Ops
Um,
4 had
it's
regen, it would have been a
problematic.
really, really good game.
Yeah,
think
I
so
think it
too.
would have been okay without it, but even then, maybe it was probably fine. Like anything between like where Black Ops 3 was, Black Ops 4 was pretty good, and this seemed more in line with where Black Ops 3 was, kind of thing. Like you can one bomb people with a burst, I'm sure. So
An underrated TTK was World War II's.
Agreed.
Yeah, it was
Had a
really
really good
good. That's a good
time to
point.
kill.
It felt really, really good in that
Mhm.
game. Yeah.
Like when you got a kill with a PPSH in that game, like
oh
you
my
felt
god,
like you
it
earned
felt
that
right.
shit.
like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that
You
was
didn't
kind of
feel
the
like,
same
oh, that
thing
was a
with
joke.
Black Ops. Yeah, Black Ops 4 was the same way with
Different
the
than
SOG. Like your tracking had to be absolutely on par if you wanted to get
You're strafing.
kill
had to
after
be
kill
on
after
point.
kill. Well, yeah, that's absolutely true. No, I'm right there with you, Nick. It definitely felt like they sped it up just a touch because the Type 821 was shredding. I mean, I was on a piece of cover at one point in time and literally got too bulleted to buy it. That was fun. But at the same point, how many of you guys actually gave up the stun to run stim shot throughout the beta this time through?
That's all I ran.
Yeah, same. And I think that also lends to some consideration that the time to kill is a touch too fast if you feel like you have to pick up stim shot. I don't know.
I mean,
in
I hope
some
it's
I
not
just
way.
think
competitive.
everyone was running it, so you had to do it to match. I don't know if the time to kill was the problem. I think maybe the regen it felt kind of long. I
A
think
little bit delayed.
And right, yeah, it felt a little bit delayed. Like it's like, damn, I got in a gunfight. So like, if you didn't have stim, you're like, I kind of need to wait here, or I'm just gonna automatically lose the gunfight. You know,
You
at
couldn't take
whatever
damage and go
25 HP.
undercover and without being risks of like the dude running up on you. Like you didn't have enough
Definitely.
time.
See,
And I guess that plays
for
into the
me,
slide too, right?
yeah, it absolutely does. And the combination of how the map is laid out. I think it's all those things
Sure.
in combination of each other. But I think if you make the TTK an extra bullet or two, depending on if it's an AR or an SMG, you don't feel like after you take one gunfight, you immediately have to run away from the next. You might be able to take that second gunfight just by standing out and making that challenge occur. That was the thing that I think that wasn't really talked a lot about in Modern Warfare, was the fact that you could only take one gunfight at a time in Modern Warfare. And I feel the same way in this game as well. Like, if you were to not have stim shot throughout the beta, even if people are against you were running it, I feel like a lot of people would not be taking the challenges that they were. Either while I was watching streams or people that I was playing with, because you take one gunfight, you get shot once, you immediately have to slide back away and stim shot up and then wait for that to come through and then take the next gunfight. That's what I missed the most about Black Ops 4, was the fact that you saw multi-kill strings off of the same clip. You know, Dashy on Seaside, TJ Halley immediately after that on the same map set. Like, those moments were incredible because of the individual skill it took to be able to track down those kills and play your single life in that same stretch. Whereas it feels like when I was playing through Cold War on the beta, and same thing with Modern Warfare, you get in one gunfight, you immediately have to back up, reset, do it again.
Yeah, unless you have a smoke.
Or yeah,
All the
yeah,
big plays we saw in Modern Warfare were behind smoke. Like
That's true.
think of
That's-
Celium's like LA clip that was 7-piece on well, I forgot the map.
It was on Ramaza, I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure.
Ramaza. And like it was
Yeah.
behind because there were two smokes in the alleyway.
That's a fair
I think
point,
that also makes the game feel a bit stagnant and slow, which a lot of people are saying, like, this game is about to be really stagnant with no double sprint, how much cover there is, and the only fact that you can challenge with a slide. I feel like the pacing of this game is going to be relatively slow. Also, obviously, in combination with that, the maps are really big. And the added fact that I think the time to kill is a bit fast, and you have to essentially take one gunfight and then reset every single time, that cycle slows the game down as well, I think, personally. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I agree. I don't know.
At that point,
Yeah, it's just like one of those things right now. I feel like within the beta where maybe they're like testing a lot of things. I think Treyarch's really good for like, testing a lot of things and then taking the community feedback. I think that's the big difference between Infinity Ward and Treyarch. It's like, okay, maybe we're gonna try this time around and we're gonna see what the community says or thinks. And I think that's always been the great thing about Treyarch's betas and alphas, specifically for as far as being able to make those adjustments, going in towards the actual game. Where I don't think that's really the case with Infinity Ward. They're just giving us the beta because that's just the thing to do in Call of Duty, and give the fans, get them hyped
Marketing.
up for the new game kind of
teaser
thing.
of it. Yeah, a
Exactly,
little
the marketing,
taste.
right?
Yeah.
For
Feel
sure,
that.
for sure.
Final takeaways as far as like overall pros and cons though from you guys, as far as like how this last beta played out though. I mean, I think my biggest con was the fact that I'm not optimistic about the maps. I think everything else is okay. I mean, obviously with a couple of adjustments, I think the game has incredible potential, but if we know anything about being involved with games, sitting there and saying that the game has incredible potential does not mean that we're ever going to see that be matched. It's just kind of, we like a lot about it. It could be a touch better. So like, what are some of your guys' biggest overall pros and cons as far as what you've experienced with the alpha and the first beta so far?
My number one takeaway with Treyarch games is always like at least from a competitive perspective, with Treyarch titles, you know you're going to get good dev support this year,
Yeah.
and that's going to be a breath of fresh air. So
Agreed.
the game feels fine to me. My yeah, I would just love to see like the next 2 maps they have lined up. Just like give me 2 more maps and then we can talk because for
Sure.
me to play and to watch, maps are 100% the most important thing about any COD game. Like it can play however you like. Honestly, the maps, the guns can feel awful or they can feel great. But if the maps aren't memorable, it's not a memorable COD game and it's not fun to watch. It's
a
not
good
fun to
point.
Great
play.
point. Great point.
Really good point.
Think of Ghost,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Right.
You died super
Um,
fast, but the maps all felt really good. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So like, yeah, that's just absolute key focus point for me.
Yeah, I guess mine were really happy with how the game feels. Like it just feels smooth. I was generally having a lot of fun. Like I really was. There wasn't really too many points where I was like, really, really frustrated. Maybe besides a whole team running double stuns with danger close, I think it was the wild card, and you're just like, can I move? Am I allowed to play? Other than that, I felt like the game feels really, really good. It's Treyarch, so like I'm kind of taking everything with a grain of salt for as far as these betas right now, and I'm not judging extremely too hard. And just like I think, for as far as the cons, I'm just a little bit worried about the movement. And well, I'm sure that will get fixed. But the maps, I think, like Rabbit touched on, if we don't see maps that are fun to play or at least flow really, really well, then it's going to make for a really unpleasant experience, not just for the casual fans, but for the competitive community as well. I feel like when we get to how some of these maps are laid out.
Nick, thoughts from you?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of fun on the alpha and beta. Like, it was a breath of fresh air for sure. There were a few concerning things, but like what Vision said, Treyarch take it with a grain of salt. The amount that they managed to change from the alpha to beta like blew me away. So I have no doubt that they can make a ton of changes in time for launch to really polish up this game and make it worthwhile for the season. Other than what we were talking about earlier with maps and the time to kill and stuff, nothing other than it really made my left thumb hurt, like having to sprint all that much. Like
More than
how-
Modern Warfare?
I was about
Dude,
to say,
I
more than
felt
Modern
I
Warfare?
felt like I was playing Warzone.
Wow.
Wow.
Okay.
It was bad. It was bad.
You're just a running a gunner, eh, Nick? You don't stop.
Yeah,
You
I
just
don't
go.
stop. I'm
I
going.
respect it. I
I'm
respect
going.
it.
So with all that in mind, and we kind of have hit on this a touch, but I think it's important to kind of bring it up one more. Like, what are your biggest wishes, I guess, not just for the open beta coming up this next weekend, but for launch specifically, or maybe even the competitive rule set? For me personally, I just want to see more weapons, more maps, and more ability to unlock things. I think generally, like playing, like you mentioned, Visions through someone who is running a danger close and then not having flak
Yeah.
jacket, just getting naded off of
Exactly.
spawn was probably
There's no counter, right?
There's no way. It's just like, okay, I guess I'm just gonna spawn die here for a little bit, just getting through, put it through the blender.
Yeah. Like it's fine to have that in the game, but you have to have a counter, right?
You have to have some ability to counter. I think the most thing that I'm excited to see, though, is objective-based game modes be added into this next beta.
Yes.
We're supposed to be getting hardpoint this next weekend. I hope we get the ability just to select hardpoint if we want. Get me on TDM
Yeah,
and
very
kill
nice.
confirm,
Dude,
man.
I can't wait to see it. Hardpoint, arms
beautiful.
race, and then they're both locked, so you can't select them.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Overall wishes though for you guys throughout, like whether it's just open beta next weekend or what you want to see in the future. I will say this much as well. I really, really, really hope that we get the re-addition of interactive and animated camos again on the weapons.
Yes.
That was the coolest part for me when it comes to Black Ops 4, and it totally helped my investment towards wanting to grind the game. Like, not just for
For
Dark
sure.
Matter, but also all of the cool ones that they added into the shop. I pulled the trigger on a few. Like, I'm not gonna lie, and I am not one
casino
to
one?
ever. I never buy animated things, never buy extra skins in games. But I actually pulled the trigger on that in Black Ops 4 on a couple different skins.
Yeah, I think what you touched on, the objective-based game modes, is something that I want to see really, really bad. Because when I was playing Hardpoint second day in the alpha, like I think that was the most fun I've had playing Call of Duty in a long time that I can remember. So, like, I actually had a lot of fun. Like it felt like there was weight behind actually rotating, and there was, it's different from Modern Warfare where like you moved across the map so fast that maybe you didn't necessarily have to, but the maps are pretty big, so like you had to actually have some kind of at least play style to it when you're playing with a group to be able to effectively play the game when you're playing against other good players, because you usually are. That was one of the big things. And, having, I think, Ninja in the game with actual silent footsteps, I think would be something I'd like to see as well. Like, it's kind of really frustrating because when you are playing 6v6, it's almost like you can't really listen to music and just chill, because you
Everyone's
got
sound whoring.
Tommy 123 over here
Dude,
with his
footsteps are so
Astro's
loud
just
in this
cranked,
game.
just
They're
listening
so
to you,
loud in this
ready
game.
to hear you halfway across the map. That's a really big problem,
It
and
sounds like
I think that
Among
makes
Us.
for a bad experience. Yeah, it literally does, right? Like that's I think the big problem, because
Yeah.
it's like you're hearing where they are rather than like actually just using like your map awareness, or your experience on where you think they're going to be and be able to play very predictive. And that's something I really hope we get going in towards next weekend.
Sure, yeah. I guess in terms of hopes for game release and on to touch on the competitive rule set side, I don't know if Control, I don't think it's been confirmed yet, but pretty much it's been like that it's going to be a thing this year.
Mhm.
And I'm intrigued to see how that
Likely.
plays in 4v4, quite
Me
frankly,
too.
because it may be a very different environment. I really liked it in Black Ops 4 as a mode, mainly because like quite often, Hardpoint and Search are always great, but the transition between them has always been a question mark. And the amount of times that Domination will come on this year, and I'm just straight out the stream, like get something done, and I'll be back for map 4. I think that was a pretty common experience people had, and that transition and that kind of swing game mode is so important. And what I love about Control is that it's so user friendly for new people. Like,
Great.
okay, we capture the 2 zones, or everyone dies, and like
Right.
just fantastic. So I think that addition was great, and yeah, I'm very intrigued to see like the pros, if they get a chance to play it and prep it before time. I imagine they've already had some play time, but it would be good to have over the next month or so some pros like properly looking into it on some of the maps to figure out how viable this is going to be. Do some of the locations need to be changed so we can kind of hit the ground running in November?
Yeah. Since you guys touched on the like objective based game modes, like wanting control and stuff, I guess I'll go more broad. For PC, like I really want to see this game like run well on the PC. I know personally, I played like majority of the season of Modern Warfare on PC, and there were
I
a
did
lot
too.
of like lot of small issues, like whether it be
Right.
like just it would randomly just start running at like 10 frames per second on your PC for no reason. When you could literally close it, open another game, and it'd run at 250. So there were small little bugs. Updates on PC like had some issues as well. And then as well to go off that, we need an anti-cheat. Need an anti-cheat
Yes, we
squad.
do.
Badly,
It would
badly.
literally take us to the next level. Like think about how successful Warzone was this year, with on top of that, how many people were bitching about killed by
For sure.
hackers and dealing with all that sorts of stuff. So if like for Warzone and Cold War this season, if we had that, I think the game would skyrocket.
Agreed. No, it's funny. We were talking about Warzone, and this is a great conversation, I think, to bring up in a future episode as like a main the focus topic. But talking about how like Warzone not only has maybe affected like the development cycle of like what COD is starting to look like from not just the title to title, but also how Warzone's impact as a BR is also affecting the multiplayer in some form. But beyond that, seeing just the overall growth of Call of Duty as like a household name because of the fact that Warzone was so successful is a really interesting talking point. But let's switch away and get off of not just the beta reactions, but talk about one of the big key things which has gotten the beta trending over the last 2 weekends, is skill-based matchmaking. Now, my personal take is the fact that I don't really see a reason why it needs to exist if you have a very good, well-fleshed-out, functional rank system behind it. The only thing I'll say is I can see the opposite side of the coin for whatever percent of people that are coming in, they don't play the game that often, maybe they're brand new to Call of Duty, and their first couple lobbies are filled with players that are a very skilled caliber. Whether you're talking about pros, top amateurs, or just people that are just publicly playing that are incredible, it can turn you off the game. For me, it feels like you're taking a very overactive measure to solve a very small problem. When you're essentially forcing top tier players to only play versus top tier players, whether they're playing in public matches or in ranked all the time, Call of Duty becomes a sweat fest for them. Beyond that, as somebody who has a variety of friends that range from people who play every single day of the week to those that play once a week, I fall right in the middle. So when I want to play with my friends that play all the time, I get
Your
worked
nitro
in those
and-
lobbies. I get smoked. I have no fun. But on the opposite side, when I want to play with my casual friends, they find themselves in that position to where, oh, I'm playing with Shift. He plays much more often. I could barely get my thumbs on the controller at times, and I feel like I'm just overall dying and dying and dying. I get why it's a thing, but I think it's way too overreaching as far as the impact it has on the overall game, personally.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to see like a 50-50 split of like skill based to an extent, like give you like a balanced team of sorts, like have like couple top end players, couple bottom end players, couple middle players, and then 50% of it be region based matchmaking. Because connection last year, more specifically, was horrible.
Terrible.
Horrible in
Yeah.
pubs. Like if you were going off in a public match, the next game you're getting like 3 people who don't even have English names in as their gamer tag, and they are pulling 3 ping while
Frying.
you're on 140. So
Yeah.
it's just stuff like that. Like I feel like this, like speaking back to Modern Warfare, because that's just the most recent tile we have to go off. Like skill-based matchmaking, it feels like was 90% to 10% region-based. So that's what I would personally like to see. Like I get that skill-based, like according to like Treyarch, people has been in the game since Black Ops 2. Like, that felt perfect. I don't know why we can't just simply go back to that. If it was
Yeah.
in there, if you want skill-based in the game, skill-based matchmaking in the game, and it was in Black Ops 2 and it worked perfectly then, why not just say it's that and go back to that? But I don't know.
I mean, yeah, like when I just know, I just think of like when like I started playing Call of Duties, and I thought of like, when like I really started to enjoy them, and why I followed the series for such a long time. And it was, going back to when you would have those lobbies where, okay, maybe not everyone on the same team, or on the other team is completely at your level, but like there's still like it felt like a decent mix of like there's at least someone that is going to be able to shoot back, and then there's maybe a couple of bots on each team. But like the problem I think right now within the beta is like I think you're seeing like the pros, tweet out a lot of images. It's like, they're like holding their own, getting 2.0s against another really good team, but their whole team is like, like triple negative or like double negative. And
Mhm.
it's like, and then everyone on the other team is like at least, positive. And it's like that's a problem because the balancing is stacked against you if you're a really, really good player. So it's like, why do I feel the incentive of playing game after game if every lobby is being rigged against me, And I understand, like you brought up, Alan, like when you're playing with someone who doesn't play in the game very, very often, you want to be able to have some kind of a balance for them. But the problem I find is just like, okay, like I'm playing against, these people that are trying to make it into challengers, or, I'm playing Gears of War pros like I was in the beta. And it's like, dude, I just want to be able to play and not have to like seriously try and feel like, this is COD champs. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's every lobby. So like the balancing of skill-based matchmaking is just obviously a problem, and it needs to be toned back, I think, a tad bit.
It's 100% been a turn off for me, I think, in actually playing COD games over the last few years, like for casual enjoyment. It's a weird one. Like, I definitely think a protected bracket for new players coming into the game makes a lot of sense. I mean, it used to be combat training back in Black Ops 2. You could go into until you were level 11.
Add it back.
What
Bring
an
it on
idea
in.
that was.
That's exactly what they should do.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, what I find interesting is that Activision wouldn't be doing this without a good reason, right? Like they must have looked at all the data over so many years and figured out, because this is what people are saying, that by rigging games in this sense, you can make your players play longer. So by deciding whether they should win a game or deciding whether they should lose a game and stacking their teams against them and putting them up against good players and mixing the skill-based with the team-based, which if anything is more of a big deal, as you're saying, like RC's tweeting out getting a decent KD, the rest of his team's getting absolutely smoked. That's a pretty common, like all of us can remember a time when that's happened to us. And yeah, I just think it's interesting because Activision must think that this route of this skill-based matchmaking increases their player time, increases their player numbers.
And it logically might.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because if you think about it, like the people that are getting hogwashed by skill-based matchmaking are the dedicated COD base who are going to come
Absolutely.
back to your game, might hop off for the night, but the next day they're right back on it. Your average
point.
Joe that's like sitting down on his 90-inch like TV that's playing for 30 minutes, if he has a couple good games, he might be like, might stay on a little bit longer. Hey, that was fun. I might hop on like tomorrow or whenever I get free time again. So, I mean, it makes sense in that aspect, but other than that,
And I think you're absolutely right, Rab. This is a conversation point that often gets missed, is the fact that the data has to suggest that this is okay. I just can't help but feel like there's been a bit of like a sand trap when it comes down to, like, since World War II, you had Black Ops 4 that had a pretty bad rank system, let's be honest. And then you had last year, which had no rank system. So adding in skill-based matchmaking and making it more enforced over Black Ops 4 Modern Warfare, like making it more constrained or like more constricted as far as who plays against who, I think makes sense because you don't have that good interactive rank system. But for me, it's like, if you have a well fleshed out rank system behind the game, if you were just to completely open up pubs, or at least open up in a much more drastic way to where there is no skill-based matchmaking, or it's extremely loose, you might find yourself in a position, like, as a new player, and I've asked this to a couple of people that are extremely casual. If you were to jump on and play every single day in COD, and if there's no skill-based matchmaking, you're playing up against people that are worse than you, people that are much better than you, you might find yourself somewhere in the middle. You might, for every now and again, find yourself on top or on the bottom. But for me, it's like the ability to go into a game, maybe you get one a night where on the other team is Arcides and Simp. That, you might get smoked. But if it only happens a couple of times, I'm going to sit up a little bit harder for that game and see how many times could I kill the names that I recognize. And I think that provides a bit of fun. Whereas if you're just in skill-based matchmaking, you have to sit that way the entire time if you're trying to do well.
Yeah. Like, think about prior games. Like, you would have, like, I could, like, give an example of, like, all right, Black Ops 2, there's, like, one person on the other team that you would be like, this guy's giving me problems on the map. But, like, in these games, it's every single player on the team is like, these guys are having me bad. And, like, you would get maybe 1 to 2 every couple lobbies in prior games. And then you'd get that golden lobby where there's just, it's like just a bunch of, like, bad players and you can just fry. But you would normally have, like, one player max. And that's where I feel like the good happy medium was, where it was like, it makes sense skill-based matchmaking Black Ops 2 when they brought it up that, yeah, it wasn't it. Like, it makes sense because you had about, like, 1 or 2 good players in every lobby. And then the rest was like a drop off. So it balanced it out that way versus just stacking you up against a challengers team.
The thing about it too, and this is the other kind of question that I framed out to one of my friends, and she's a streamer, she plays a variety of games, but Call of Duty is like one of her favorites that she likes to go back to. And I asked her, you know, if there was a good rank system behind it, would you feel the pressures of a win-loss in a public lobby if there was no skill-based matchmaking? Because one of the things that she always said whenever we'd play together is that she always feels bad playing with me because she feels like she's going to make our team lose. But at the end of the day, if there's a good rank system behind it, where that's where you're grinding for wins over losses, would you still feel the pressure, though, of going into a public lobby that, oh, I'm playing with someone who's better than me, but are you going to feel bad if you lose because there's a good rank system behind it where you're actually going for wins? And her answer was no, I wouldn't feel the pressure of wanting to win in a public lobby if I had a location or a venue to go to in which I'm actually playing for wins. That's, I think, another discrepancy in where I feel like a lot of the skill-based matchmaking essentially becomes more punishing, is the fact that you feel like you have to always play to win. And
yeah, I actually like wanted to win pubs this beta.
Yeah, I mean, VisionZz, you guys were saying that you guys were on a huge-ass winning streak.
I was telling my teammates to tee up, like, we're only down 5, tee up.
Yeah, like, that wouldn't exist, I feel like, if there was a good rank system behind it, and you could just go and literally enjoy the game from a casual standpoint.
Yeah, it was crazy, actually. I was just thinking, like, back when Black Ops 2 was the in thing, and Black Ops 3, the amount of fun I had hopping into pubs and using guns that I didn't normally use, trying out, because, like, you know, you're sweating the game. I'm using XYZ, but I want to get dark matter. I want to get these different guns. Gold, I need to get my headshots on my pistols. Like, and it was so much fun hopping into some games using the Chicom CQB, just giving it a go, trying out the SWAT 556. Just guns that weren't viable, but I had so much fun exploring what's in the game. And the problem is that obviously, when you start playing COD, you're hopping in, you're using the AK-74, you're using the Uzi, whatever the best guns are. And then all of a sudden, your skill rank is at the point where if you try and use anything else, you are getting worked, son.
That's what got me off the grind for Damascus last year in Modern Warfare. As soon as I got through SMGs, I got through a couple ARs, I was like, man, I really don't want to use the AK, so I'm just going to stop doing it.
Yeah. You feel like you can't. I actually, like, I love that point from Rab, because, like, I just remember playing, like, Black Ops 2, for example, and I feel like I could do well with every gun just about in the game. Like, I feel like there was never, like, a time period where, I wouldn't be able to do it. I felt like the same thing in Modern Warfare 3, actually, as well. But, like, my
Yeah,
whole time playing
oh,
Modern Warfare, and I actually did play a lot of pubs this year, but I was mainly playing S&D, and I felt like there was never a time where I was like, okay, I'm gonna use a different weapon other than the M4 or the MP5. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
I almost felt like I felt like the need to in order to do well, because like if I wasn't doing well, then
You're
like
just not having fun.
I'm not gonna play the game. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna have fun. So like I have to use those weapons in order to have some kind of fun. And yeah, I think that's really the big difference, I think, between skill-based matchmaking compared to what we used to have compared to now for sure.
Look,
So yeah, I like that point.
I didn't bring this up when we were playing earlier Visions, but when we first started playing the beta together, like of course the first couple of games I had a great time, but the reason like why I started to like to feel like I was getting put in the blender is not only because I was playing poorly, but because like you guys were like making callouts on TDM and where people were, and I was trying to listen to freaking Drake radio on Spotify the entire time, and I felt like I could not do both of those things, and that's where I feel
Sure.
like the punishment of skill-based matchmaking really kind of rears its head at you. And that's why I think that if there is to be skill-based matchmaking, I get why it's there. If someone walks into a lobby and is continually getting smoked, they're probably not going to play for very long. But at the same point, I'm one of those guys that sits right in the middle, and I'm always having to try, or if I'm playing with my friends that are above me, I'm always getting smoked. Because I'm just not a controller player. I grew up on mouse and keyboard. I'm not good at it. It's just the way it goes. I know what I'm going to get myself into when I sit there and start to tweet out saying, looking for 2 to play Black Ops 4 League play. I know what I'm getting into. I know what I need to do to try to like to be successful there. I'm looking to make calls. I'm looking to win. I'm looking to play with people that are similarly in that same mindset. I don't want to have to do that every single time I sign out of the game. That was one of the reasons why, like in 2020, I put less hours into Modern Warfare than I did in 2019 in the 2 months that it was out in that year. It just,
That's crazy.
And that's wild, man. I spent the time analyzing the game. I would watch back on VODs, but I just did not enjoy playing the public playlist, even the CDL playlist, because there was no reason to play it because there's no ranked.
Yeah, that's the big problem too, right? Like there was people I think better in the public lobbies than there were in the CDO playlist.
Absolutely.
Like that is
It also-
absolutely a fact, you know?
It also didn't help that there was absolutely no prestige system. and,
Yeah,
That's
like,
true.
yeah. I mean,
having to just go to 155 and then get reset.
yeah,
for,
next
like,
season resets. Yeah, it doesn't feel like there's any
like,
progression,
absolute
right?
dagger to the heart.
Yeah, that's for sure a problem.
I don't know. Anyone else have thoughts on skill-based matchmaking before we move on? A deafening no. Okay,
Being
sounds
listened
great.
to death.
So let's talk about the competitive future now coming up. Of course, we're going back to 4v4 for the first time in 2 years. It's going to be a drastic change, not only because of the things we've talked about when it comes down to things like the map design and things like that, but on the same front, we're also dropping a ton of pros that were previously there in the last 2 years that will now be in the challengers scene. So just generally and broadly, reactions on going from 5v5 to 4v4. This is an old topic, but I'm really actually curious to get all of your guys' individual takes as far as what you feel about going back to 4v4 after the last 2 years.
A year too late and a year too early.
Mhm.
Explain.
Should have done it last year or should have done it next year.
Yeah, before
Mm.
franchising for sure, right?
Yeah, either that
Yeah.
or wait till you expand because the 12 players getting screwed over just doesn't sit right with me.
No, I agree.
It's absolutely the right move long term, but I agree the timing is horrible, like for the pros.
Atrocious.
Like,
Mhm.
are you kidding me? They win champs, have to drop Clay the next day.
That's
Like,
wild.
That's
am I
so
seeing
bad.
this right? Okay, yeah. I mean, I agree. The move to 5v5 in the first place, whatever, we tried it. It went pubs 5v5, competitive was 5v5. Modern Warfare comes out, pubs is 6v6. Apparently, there were some people even suggesting we should make comps 6v6. Doesn't happen. Stays 5v5. And okay, so what's the point even making it 5v5 in the first place if now pubs is going back to 6v6? Okay, what? You know, I think 4v4 plays better. People definitely discuss about how it can be the chaos maybe is more entertaining. People have different sides to the argument. Like the Twitter polls tend to be like 60-40 in favor of 4v4.
Could be
You know,
more
maybe
enjoyable if you have an ibuprofen on hand.
I think that's fair as well.
I don't.
But yeah, I think it's just about timing, frankly, to do it.
I didn't mind 5v5 at all. Like there was it changed at least slightly like the culture and mindset of what makes good Call of Duty good Call of Duty. It's like going into Black Ops 4, everyone was KD. And that was mostly because like if you are rocking hard KDs in 4v4, you're probably carrying your entire team through the match. That's just the way that it goes. And in 5v5, kill death ratio didn't make a difference, especially in Black Ops 4 where team shotting was everything. And then you got to Modern Warfare, where kind of the same ideas were there, but you take it almost to the next level as far as what does team coordination look like, because the maps were extremely large. It also came down to like how you're going to rotate, how you're going to set up for breaks. It's not just the same kind of forward face smash that we kind of got in Black Ops 4. So like it brought like another level of strategicness to the game, in which we maybe we didn't have a chance to really see unfold as clearly because it was just 4v4. That's pure speculation, but I feel like a lot of people that enjoyed 4v4 was because you got to see the highlight player be that superstar and impact what the outcome of the match looked like. You didn't necessarily get that as much in 5v5.
I agree. I mean, I think like the biggest thing is like, I mean, obviously, like I came to the scene when it was 4v4, like way back when, and it popped off in Black Ops 2, and I just loved that. And I think the other big takeaway is like in 5v5, like there weren't really like dedicated roles per se. Like, yeah, there's someone maybe running smokes and running this and running that, and you have a main AR still, but like it feels like in 4v4, like there's like much more like role based. It's like, okay, like this is going to be your objective player, this is your flex player, this is your main AR, and this is maybe like, you know, your Slayer, utility player, whatever, right? There's going to be like much more dedicated roles. And I think like there's going to be now like equaling it up to like when you're looking for swaps and we get halfway through the season, it's like, damn, like this is a really good objective player on this team that is not doing too well. So maybe you pick him up and he's doing the dirty work for you. You know, someone like TP, you know, back in the day, who was maybe never really popping off for as far as the slang, but always definitely contributed towards the team and did the dirty work that no one else was really seeing, especially the casual fans. So like I think that's really my biggest takeaway is like I'm really looking forward to see who's going to be able to kind of play in those roles and really kind of pop off going in towards this year. And it's going to be like a lot easier to digest. Like, you know, you're looking for like a Modern Warfare hidden. I mean, you know, Alan, we casted this in the entire year. It's like, damn, like I have no idea where this like is going to go, because it's just like everyone collapsing at once. So like the way you're framing up the call is just like, well, you know, there's a couple of kills, but you're not saying one team wins it or the other. But when someone pops a two-piece this year, like it's going to be massive, right? It's half the team. So that's the big thing.
Kill feeds will not be nearly as impossible to read.
You
I
know?
totally feel that.
Yeah, that's why like just to hop in real quick, like I have the utmost respect for you two being able to have your come up in like 5v5 out of anything. Like that is truly remarkable. Like you guys are insane. You guys are next level.
Thank you, Nick.
Stop it.
Yeah, and backing off what you said, I thought it was a really interesting point of going from 5v5 back to 4v4, how teams are going to structure their roster. Because I remember like in World War II, we were getting to the point of, okay, you know, there's not like a set objective player anymore. But, you know, still the meta in that game was to put your assault rifle in the hill and have the other guys battling around him, and the SMGs would put out the cuts. Like, that was kind of like the way the meta played in that game. And as you say, in 5 versus 5, it was kind of like, well, every player pretty much has to do everything because anyone could die at any time and you have to push and trade. And it's like, go back to 4v4, who is going to be able to adapt to that new environment? Is that kind of new age thinking of siding in and trading still going to be super prevalent in 4v4? Or are teams like Los Angeles Guerrillas, for example, that just announced yesterday, guys that won the world championship in the last kind of traditionally playing boots on the ground game, are they going to be much quicker to adapt to how this game should be played? And, you know, I think that is a big question, right? Because Simp hasn't played, obviously he's going to be phenomenal. It's Simp, like, don't get me wrong. But, like, he hasn't played a competitive game on 4 versus 4. So it's certainly going to be interesting to see how Atlanta FaZe play the game early on. Like, what game
how long it takes to break bad habits.
That's so interesting of a talking point, because if you go back to like last year when scrims were becoming a thing going into the first weeks, the reason why Atlanta FaZe were so dominant early, and Nick, I'm sure you could speak more onto this, was the fact that they played the game, they figured out how to play it at a faster tempo than anybody else out there. The speed, that was the whole thing.
They had like they win like 80, they win like 83-3 in their first month of scrims, something like that, something ridiculous.
Yeah, and that's the interesting conversation point, because I feel like that speed is going to be necessary for this next year, but it has to be smart speed. Where, not to sit there and say that like the Atlanta FaZe didn't do that, because they absolutely did, but when you don't have Major Maniac running through Azir Caves from 4 all the way back over to 2 by himself, is that team as successful? You know, that's just like a hypothetical question, but when you get rid of that 5th member, how do you make speed feel smart? And I think that, honestly, that LAG team very well could maybe set that up for us, considering how well-versed they were, not just in the last game that we had in World War II that was 4v4, but they also have a very young, aspiring player in Vivid who plays extremely quickly and has his own ideas as far as what he thinks is successful. I know it's an interesting conversation point to see, like, what we had, because this is going to be, like, not just 4v4, but it's going to be Like, the questions of what would 4v4 have looked like in Modern Warfare, I think we're going to get some of those answers in some form here in Black Ops Cold War, because the maps are going to be, let's figure, much larger than what we have seen in World War II in all the 4v4 games that were predecessors to World War II. Interesting.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I think there's going to be I think a lot of the top teams and top players that we have coming off the last game, I still think they're going to be, the top players and top teams going in towards this game. I think the biggest thing is adaptation. And in a lot of ways, these players have proved that, especially I think the players coming from like the S&D scene, which, is people like a BZ and Simp and
Right.
people like Illy and, maybe not so much Shotzi, but came from a different title and had maybe one of the biggest adaptations when you come from a different FPS to a new one. So like, I think it's still going to be relatively easy for a lot of these top players coming out of Modern Warfare to be able to do this, but it's definitely going to be a different feel, right? Like coordination now is just more important than it ever was within 5v5, where it's like someone can pop a multi-kill for you in one of the pinches that you're coming to attack, and that can open up the hill, where it's like if you lose that one-on-one gunfight on the pinch, like that might cost you the break on the hill. So like there's a lot more weight behind individual gunfights now, which is also going to, I think, play a factor. And a lot of these mechanically talented players, I think, are still going to be able to shine through in those individual gunfights and on those pinches and stuff like this. So I agree, Alan. Yeah, the coordination, I think, is going to be very important, complemented with the speed for sure, I think.
So with that in mind, what are your guys' thoughts on players like Mental and Snakebite going to give COD a go coming out of Gears of War? Obviously, the game's somewhat similar. Obviously, there's a bunch of differences that you can pick apart. But just generally speaking, Mental, he's substitute LAG, officially announced as being part of the Academy roster for LAG.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that those guys will do coming out of a couple of years that now have been 5v5, where coordination has meant everything, and now we're going to 4v4, which I guess speculation would lend towards the fact that individuals could potentially mean the difference between a win and a loss coming forward in the competitive side of the game?
Super exciting to me.
Yeah.
Definitely, whatever you can put Mental on a pedestal in terms of where he stood within Gears of War, on par with like some of the absolute greats that have come over from Halo to Call of Duty. And
Mm-hmm.
there's not many great players that have come over from Halo to COD and like not just popped off and been phenomenal.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting to see how that transfers in Gears of War. Super excited to see it, because I wager to guess that at some point in the year, Mental's going to find his way into that starting lineup. I would say that's very likely. And I mean, obviously Shotzi's like just a special breed, but I mean, Mental, like, people put him in similar ballparks. So I mean, Shotzi just went straight into a starting team, and it took him a few months to get really into the groove of things. So
Once he
yeah, I mean,
did.
this is great. Like, Gears of War is not an
And
easy game, man.
yeah,
Like, no aim assist. It's a weird game. It's not going to be the same as COD, but in terms of mechanical skill, like, this guy is out of control. And yeah, hope we get to see him in starting team sooner rather than later.
I think what's also good with Mental is he has past history in COD as well. He played
True.
Black Ops 4 like wagers and stuff, and then on top of that, before like he like popped off in the gear scene, he played Advanced Warfare. Like as like an AM back then. I remember like back then literally he was on like a wager team with me, and then I got absolutely hogwashed and kicked off it. But like he's really good. He's a good player. So, but he has that like past like natural, like he knows COD is what I'm trying to get at. He like has like that on top of his ability in Gears, just his movement ability and all that. Being able to bring that into COD is what I'm gonna be interested to see, if it's like a Shotzi. Like, because we ever had a Gears pro come over and attempt COD?
Not that I know.
Not at a major, not at a top level. It doesn't feel
Because
like.
I
Yeah, not
want
at top
what I
level.
want to know is if they have any ways of coming up to break movement and like change the game different than Halo players do. Because that could be interesting if we see like Mental come in and like just break a movement or something and just like completely shock the world with some like slide jump like crouch movement or whatever.
Something crazy.
But yeah, I think he'll eventually make his way into a starting role, because of the raw talent he has. If you see any of the starters on that roster struggle, I think he's the first one to get the call up.
Agreed. I mean, because Chino's the other sub that's out there in LA, and as good as Chino is, it just I feel
I think just because not only that, but also not to like knock Chino, but Mental comes from that that original Optic Gears like team, so they have content
Right.
behind them. So he has sort of a face and a personality that people
Name
know.
brand, yeah.
So I think that will also help with like LAG kind of sweeten the pot with bringing him up eventually.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I played against the Gear Pros for second day of the beta, first came on, and we worked them a little bit. So maybe Mental's not gonna come in too
Okay.
hot. No, but
Okay, okay.
all serious aside, like we watched him in the Black Ops 4 throwback with or hosted by Hitch there, and even though like his team didn't do great, Mental was holding his own.
Yeah, he
And
played
I
well.
think like the biggest takeaway, and I know like Snakebite's also like in this conversation as well, but I think like the talk's really around Mental because he's a very successful Gears of War player. I think like the biggest compliment that like he gets in that scene is like he's extremely intelligent. And I mean like
Hmm.
intelligence is going to like transfer over to a different FPS. It's like the way you look at the game and it's the way like you're practicing the game is like something that's really really valued by teammates. And I think that's what's going to shine through on this challengers team, whether or not they're successful in challenges or not. Like I think that's going to be the big takeaway for as far as like the coaching staff and how they're dealing with that challengers team and how they're looking at them individually. So I honestly think that he's going to be absolutely fine coming in towards this new year, and I think there's a really really good chance that he makes it on towards an SCDO team like you guys are saying, because
Hmm.
there's something to say about being a very successful FPS player, whether it's a different title or not. That's already translated from people like Shotzi from Formal way back in the day on how that can come over towards a different title, and you can still kind of emphasize your overall skill into a different game. So yeah, I've high hopes for him, and I think it's overall good for the scene, right? Like this is
Agreed.
fantastic. Different players coming in from a different esport into ours, and I mean that's just going to help us overall. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what he does.
Yeah, I think the exposure level of just the storyline itself, let alone the player, is nothing but good stuff for the overall COD community. But beyond that, and
Mhm.
this is interesting because we're talking about the Academy team. Of course, LAG announces their official Academy team pending league approval with the addition not just of Chino and Mental, but also with Exceed and Nero. On paper, seems like a good idea.
Mhm.
Timing wise, though, is my curious question for you guys, because it feels a bit strange to be making an announcement on a Challengers Academy roster before we're even into the game, let alone before we even know what Challengers is going to look like. So
Hmm.
I felt
Maybe they know.
blindsided and am pretty shocked as far as seeing an announcement on an official level so much. Like I know a lot of players are out there saying that this is a group of 3 that we're trying to play with, and this is a group of 4 that we're looking for org representation with. That makes sense coming out of the challenger scene, but for LAG to take such a big step forward, do any of you guys feel like it's maybe a bit over ambitious with when they decide that this is going to be their academy team for the year potentially?
It is certainly
Mm.
interesting because when you look at what a lot of teams are possibly looking to do is pick up substitutes based on, potentially how well people seem to be in early season. There
Right.
doesn't seem to be a deadline for when they need to lock in their challengers players. And if the season doesn't start till late January, but maybe it even gets pushed back a little bit this year because the game comes out a little bit later or whatever. Like let's say season starts like right at the start of February or something. There's no reason why teams can't sign substitutes, to my knowledge, up till the end of the year or something like
Right.
that, and give it a month of the game to see what these players are looking like, and also save a few quid by not having them on the books for the extra couple of months. So it is interesting. I guess the only reason why you would do it is just to make sure that no other organization is going to snap these guys up. And if they're really confident in that core, then I suppose that makes sense. Like getting Mental on now as a substitute makes sense because if you don't
That
do it now,
yeah,
probably
I
someone
agree
else
with
going
that.
to get him.
Yeah, exactly.
But getting the entire roster is like, maybe it's not necessary.
Because my whole thing, I mean, with the challengers seem going to be completely littered with former pro players, the options are going to be limitless when it comes to forming teams in challengers. There might be a bit of a boys club, though, when it comes down to, like, former pros only wanted to play with former pros.
Mhm.
Like, that's the only other thing that I can sit there and say that would, like, okay, we should lock in this group of 4 because they do not want to play with anybody else unless they have, like, CWL or CDL experience. But for me, it just
But
felt
after
like...
the year challengers just had, do you do that?
Exactly. That was my follow-up point is, with how much things changed, even just in last year, it feels strange, I think. Because even the teams that won challengers in their regions outside of the Renegades and APAC, they made at least a couple of roster changes throughout the year. So there is no true, like, here is the formula, we're going to stick with this, and this is our team for the full year. The only exception to that might be like Carnage Gaming, who didn't really make any changes throughout the entire year, and Triumph technically only made like one near the beginning of the online season. But even the Atlanta FaZe Academy team went through its own roster changes when things were on LAN versus when it went to online, with, you know, Venom being picked up as soon as they got to the Dallas Online series. So I don't, it just feels strange that this is the time that they're choosing to lock down specifically these 4 players.
A little bit different.
I mean, maybe LAG just knows something that the rest of the community doesn't, right? Like, maybe there is just a solidified Challengers League coming in towards next year, and they're like, let's lock down 4 now, and that's why they're making the announcement.
Man.
Yeah, fingers crossed, for sure.
That definitely.
I
right?
would say,
awesome.
Does anyone else think that this team literally is just for like mental, like to help him develop? Like, I mean, once he's developed enough to get him up there, this wouldn't be
possible.
like they just want like a team to be around him to make sure that he's like gonna have a team to scrim with and dedicate with to develop as a player.
That
and then
I think makes sense, but
and then as soon as that's done, just hit the hay, like you're gone.
I feel like if you're gonna do that though, to try to help developmental, why not wait to see what pros are going to be out or former pros are going to be out in the market and put one of the more veteran players in the mix? Like, no,
look at the backlash he got when it got announced, though.
Well, I guess
every challenger was spiteful, or every challengers player was spiteful towards him because
but I'm talking about like there are going to be some former pros that are out there that are going to realize the ability to associate yourself with mental, and that could potentially attribute to more success. Because there's going to be players that are out there that were former pros. I mean, it's the players that were in challengers all year long that were upset about that, right? I don't think you're going to get that same reaction to players that were just in the CDL that now have to go into challengers. They might look at that as being an opportunity. And not to put any shame against Exceed and Nero, because they're both incredible players, but it just feels like if you were to gear the team specifically for mental's development, why not find somebody who's been in the pro league to kind of show them the ropes in that regard? Because, like, yeah,
and it may not just be mental. Maybe it's the 3 of them, and then they're pairing him with Chino as like the veteran leadership.
Very well could be.
Like, maybe it's the 3 of them. It could be. But specifically, it looks to me like with that roster and just it reminds me of like a Toronto Black, like the Toronto Black squad or whatever they went by, where they just scrimmed so they had like they weren't rusty if they ever actually needed to be called up.
Well, it paid off by the end of the year because that roster was a revolving door up until the last 2 weeks of the season. So
yeah,
I don't know. It's an interesting talking point, I think, for sure. But with that in mind, this is the other interesting thing, obviously, with the numbers of players that are out there being cut from the CDL down to challengers. You're going to have a much harder time, I think, finding great rookies. But HyDra gets announced to the NY Subliners into the school of Clayster, where he'll have Mack and HyDra essentially mold. Rab, I know that you being out of the European scene, you've had at least more buzz kind of probably surrounding your timeline on as far as what HyDra's been able to bring to the scene. But what are the thoughts as far as the first overall full rookie to be announced to a CDL squad in the form of HyDra?
It's an awesome story.
It really is.
And especially from the European scene, it's super cool to see because especially with the pandemic, like, and only getting 2 teams in Europe when franchising comes into effect, being a top amateur in Europe is not an easy thing to be because it's very easy for most of the professional teams to pick up guys that are local and maybe have played tournaments with some of the guys in the pro teams in S&D Chels or whatever. Being out of the European and the APAC scene is a very challenging thing to move over to a lot of these franchises. And I think this can, if anything, pave the way for guys like Afro or guys like Pred to get a starting spot, a sub spot, or at least be in consideration. Because if HyDra does well, all of a sudden people are looking at Europe and thinking, I mean, obviously the challenger scene is hyper competitive and there's so many great teams in Europe, but they don't really necessarily get that exposure because they're playing against each other and not against the North American talent. So really interesting to see how quickly this develops. I think they've been in discussions maybe with him for a while, even before Clayster did that tweet. But still, I mean, to see this happen as quickly as it did is remarkable. And I mean, certainly he would have got somewhere, right? Like he was phenomenal throughout Modern Warfare. The fact that he isn't on Paris is just a huge L.
I was just about to say, what a slap in the face to all European fans for him not for. You had the guy. You finally, for the first time in COD, Europe has the guy the
It's
new
not just Europe, it's
number one
France
rookie,
has a guy.
and he got on a North American team.
Yeah, I know.
Like,
It is embarrassing.
especially with the situations that Royal Ravens and Legion are in. It would have been
Yeah,
different if they had set
sure.
rosters, but like with what's going on with them now, what's rumored with them now, it's like
Mm,
the biggest slap in the
I
face if I
don't
was
even
a
know if they're
European
going to get
fan.
French guys now, which is like the French fans are basically just going to support New York. Like that's just how
Yeah,
it's
that's
going to be.
Yeah, probably.
So
it's
yeah,
just like,
that is.
I mean, it was literally a softball pitch for him. It's the closest thing you could get to like having the number one pick in like a draft. Like he's
Yeah, it's probably
your
the best way you could say
nationality.
it.
He's your nationality that your city or that your franchise represents, and you let him walk to the North American scene, and now I don't know what Paris does.
Dude, Paris is. I mean, they dropped the ball, and it was funny because what was it like a month ago when Crone had tweeted out like, "This is what Paris is looking for: a top 4 squad, mostly comprised of
Yeah.
French players with pro experience."
Minimum salary.
Hello.
Yeah, minimum salary.
Yeah,
Yeah,
minimum
it's like,
salary.
oh yeah, look at the lineup
like,
of
no
people
matter
ready
what
to
they-
jump on that team.
I don't think no matter what they do roster wise now, just because of the could have been, it's an F for their roster grade for the
Apps
year.
has to be. Has
No
to be.
Yeah.
matter what they do, it's got to be an F.
Yeah, I couldn't
I don't
believe that they dropped the ball on HyDra.
Like even
It's
if they
tough.
end up with like Scraps, Wuskin, and like stuff like that, like the players that are available, even if you grab the best players in free agency pool, with what you could have had and the opportunities, if you just like bit the bullet and like spend a little bit of money, it's got to be at least an F. I don't know how you go any lower than that, but it's at least an F.
So I mean,
Yeah.
at this point, do you think Paris is just completely screwed? I mean, the
Yes.
only option that they
I
have
mean,
by
yeah.
meeting their mark is by picking up players like Whaler, Zeke, Risk, that was former overtime denial, but that doesn't meet the mark of being a top 4 squad.
Just
And in a
admitting
league,
your
It
elbow
just
at that
sucks. It
point.
just
That's
really
the
sucks
problem.
because we've yet to have a COD year where every single team is competing for a championship. There's always one or two teams that's just at the bottom can't compete, and it looks like Paris is going to be that team. So
They could still form a very competitive team out of the players that are left in free agency. Whether they will successfully pull
Yeah.
that off,
or if they
given
want to,
that have been made so far, is a question. And that's the thing. Like if they decide not to go down the route now of getting French players, because the problem is like if you do decide to build a French core,
you're
they're
not going to
just
be
like
competitive. It's
you're
not gonna
lacking
happen.
in
everyone.
talent.
Yeah, that's true
Hmm.
also. But like everyone's just gonna take the mick, right? Because you could have had HyDra as your French core, and then either you have him for a couple of years, or he just absolutely pops off and you get to sell him for a bag.
They
You know,
lost their Zaiwu. I mean,
whatever the case is. Yeah,
that's literally how I think of it. They literally had a Zaiwu in front of them and let him walk.
yeah.
Mind-blowing. Well, so
I don't
with that in mind, there's a lot circulating. You guys brought it up about the Twins. I mean, it feels weird. VisionZz, we talked about this yesterday in the Diffuse briefly. The fact that we might not see either of the Marshall brothers playing in the CDL this next year after the year that they just had is
Yeah, man.
absolutely scrambling my brain.
Listen, like London absolutely killed it at COD Champs, and the most
Fourth
important tournament
place,
of the year,
by the
right?
way. It's like
Yeah.
no one's gonna, like people.
I don't know how that's like almost like under the radar. Like it's like,
Well-
dude, like they had an incredible performance at Champs. They beat a
Mhm.
lot of really, really good teams, and I think for the most part, London was counted out for maybe like a 6th place finish, maybe. Like I think no one really thought that they would make the run that they did, and yeah, like the Twins were there to do it. Like it's like so insane to me. And I mean, I can see them signing Shawnee, who actually also had a pretty good champs and had a couple of really good tournaments later in towards the year and bounced back hard after the first year. And I can see them signing, but like, why not keep the Twins there, like with him as well? Because the synergy seems to be there. Like they're also fantastic for your brand. Like, I mean, like I have to assume like the whole
to be.
community over there like loves the Twins, and it just feels like it makes sense to keep them on the Ravens, and that's not what's happening. So like, I'm just really puzzled on what they're going to do with the entire squad. But I mean, it would just be an insane world to see those guys not on a CDL team. Like I just like I would have never ever made that prediction, I think, in a million years
No
coming into
chance.
towards Cold War, that those guys would not be on a CDL team.
Mhm.
No.
It's like London's run from last year literally has the same vibe as like Enigma 6 run from Black Ops 4. It was
Yeah.
incredible, but nobody really, I feel like, talks about how incredible it was.
True.
Mhm.
Like, it's going to be something that just probably gets forgotten and swept under the rug. But, like, E6 did almost the exact same thing with the teams that they beat. They almost took down E United to get to the winners finals. I mean, it was insane to think that, and then you still had players like General not on a team. I don't. It's wild to me because at the same point, like Kismet is now officially going to be in Challengers, like not signed back to Paris. So like you still have an instance where you've got players that have proven themselves at a very high level, and especially when you consider the extra weight that the Twins bring is probably the most reputable players out of the European scene.
Yeah,
when it
like
comes
it feels
to brand
like
recognition.
London
It's
lost
just
the face of their brand.
absolutely.
Yeah.
They're the only team in the CDL that after year one now doesn't have like an identity.
Well, you can make the argument for
Besides,
Minnesota,
like,
I think,
Paris.
as well.
Paris,
but
maybe? Well, no, because the players on Minnesota, like
you
they
got
all
two
have their
duos
own.
together, right? And
Yeah, like
but
that-
just like as
you
far
still
as
have the same
carrying it from one
tandem.
year to the next, you don't really have that ability.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. To my take, there must be some reason behind this that we don't see public facing because
has to be.
as we've discussed it,
Gotta
like
be money. It's gotta
yeah.
be money, I would assume.
it's I mean, but if it was money, they could have let them go and re-sign them at a lower price. I imagine what they're trying to do with Dylan Codd. So, I don't know if it's a chemistry thing. I don't know if it's not meshing well with the coaching staff. I don't know whether they decided to build around Shawnee and Dylan and say, like, what direction you want to go and do you want a team with these guys or whatever. Because I know that Shawnee got on super closely with all the coaching staff there and was super receptive to the improvements that they helped the team make in the latter half of the year. And given he was on, I imagine, like a low salary contract, substitute contract initially, probably makes sense to keep him on. And you don't want to let go of Dylan Codd, even though he didn't have the greatest year. And you could argue, okay, was Dylan Codd not putting up the numbers because the rest of the team, i.e. Scraps and Wiskin, weren't supporting him in that role like the support he got in Black Ops 4? Don't know. It must have been a discussion that the coaching staff and the Ravens have had. To me, though, it's just a weird one because both of those players were great this season, have been great for the last couple of
Incredible.
seasons, and they're the face of the brand. That's the issue. So it's like, you've got to have a really good reason to get rid of them. So we shall see how this new team turns out.
I don't know.
What's interesting about London is that like, whatever happened to Nasty?
Well, wasn't
Oh,
it the
that was
whole
rough,
thing was
man.
this supposed
Visa
like it was
issues,
visa
right?
issues was the initial problem of getting him on in the COVID world. But I mean, that
So
feels
now
like
that we're in the off season, is there any
you
way to go
have to
back?
be pushing for Nasty, I think, if you're the London Royal Ravens, considering
That's
the
why I'm-
rumored
Maybe.
potential roster. I
Yeah.
feel like you need him if you're going to try to keep a British identity behind the squad,
Mhm.
and also kind of build the same kind of storyline that you got from like HyDra out of France. The fact that he is an insane up and comer and has proven himself in this last Challengers year specifically.
If you're Paris, do you just go yoink the entire war team?
That is probably your best option, honestly.
Yeah.
Or
Like,
some combination of some
low-key,
war players and singularity
They
players.
slayed
I
all year
mean,
long.
Like,
I wouldn't be
might-
surprised if they're looking into that. I think they are literally looking at all options right now.
Yeah.
So
wait, hold on a second. I gotta go back and check. I want to say that Nasty posted recently that it's
He's
B
on a
Sport,
ton
Josh,
this year.
Vortex, Nasty, and Dave are all
Yeah,
looking for
that's
an
right.
organization representing Challengers this year. So that maybe that conversation isn't happening because that's
insane.
that's
Yeah.
nuts. That's that's the core three out of
things can
obviously
change though
teamwork.
with that.
That
That's
is
true.
But
crazy.
very
I
interesting.
don't know. Final thoughts. Let's wrap this thing up because we've been going for a while. Top 3 overall squads. We obviously know what they're going to bring to the table from 5v5 going into 4v4. I'm going to just pass over Nick because I know his answer. Who is going to be the most terrifying team in the
Can you make it
2021
green?
season? In your mind, based on what has been signed. I will get your thoughts eventually, Nick, on your own team, but I
Sounds
figure you're probably going to say Atlanta.
You are correct.
I think I have to echo that just because could you pick better players in theory for each of those roles? Give me your 2 SMGs, the best ones you could possibly think of.
Yeah.
Abeezy's number 1, Simp's number 2, or the other way around. Doesn't matter. It's like that's a guarantee. You tell any player in the entire game who doesn't play an SMG role, who are the 2 players you want on your team first, they're saying Abeezy and Simp almost every time. So I mean, they're not untouchable in those roles. Then you've got a main AR, or at least like a flex role. Who do you want as your flex? Like, Celium could basically do it all. Phenomenal Slayer, incredible clutch factor, absolute Iceman in the game 5s. And then the only thing that core was really lacking this season, and they've said it themselves, is some, ice, I suppose, in the grand finals or some sort of leadership figure to tell them, like, look, we got this. Yeah, we lost that round, but it's all good. Let's adapt and do X, Y, Z. Someone like that they kind of had with Clayster and United. They didn't have on that team last season. And Arcides believes he can bring that to the role, playing in his most comfortable main AR role. Also is a player that a lot of players have a lot of respect for, believe is incredibly talented, can do a number of different roles. And the fact that he was so good this season effectively as a flex and now is running his preferred role with guys that he's won a world championship with before. I mean, you got to say it's tough to look past this team. Second place, I guess, would probably be Dallas, right? Because they are the reigning world champions. Let's just not
Sure.
take that away. I mean, Hugeli Shotzi, like, absolutely unprecedented what they were putting out at champs. The one question mark to me is Clayster obviously brought something to that team, whether it was like a hype factor of the key moments, because Crimsix seemed to be a more level-headed leadership type figure on the squad. And how they adapt to the lack of Clayster in that team. Is it that Crimsix has to step up in that regard and try and take other elements to his character? Is it Rambo who kind of steps up to that degree? But there's something they're missing there. Whereas Atlanta, it seems like they've gained everything that they potentially were missing. So that's probably why I favor them. And Chicago, of course, have an unbelievable amount of talent, but like compared to those two rosters, it's probably have to put them third.
VisionZz?
Yeah, so on paper, I think that Atlanta FaZe, I gotta agree here. I think this is maybe gonna be everyone's take. Atlanta FaZe probably looks the meanest. And I think Rab hit on some great points for as far as, when you think of the best SMGs in the game, like I think Simp and Abizi just come to mind for sure. So I think that team is gonna be absolutely nasty. And my key factor, I think, for me is like when I'm really looking like at a team and I'm looking at like, like veteranship and things like this, it's like, okay, like you might have somebody on the team that's going to be able to teach you the game, but like I think there's like this aspect that's not really talked about within like Call of Duty as like an esport of like shot calling, and how like an in-game leader can kind of play that big factor on like, okay, like everyone knows what they need to do, but at certain moments in the game you have to make those split decisions saying we need to rotate right now, and everyone gets on the same page and they rotate. We need to hit this one last time and fight for this time. Like it's like those little moments that like I think obviously Clayster does extremely well, where I think RCS is going to be able to fill those shoes really well. Because I mean, maybe Nick might be able to talk about this, but I don't really think that there was one person on the on that team last year on Atlanta FaZe that really stuck out to me as someone who could really make that like last second shot call. I felt like everyone was kind of would
Yeah, it
make
was more
that
of a
call at some point in
cohesive
time,
thing.
right? That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So like for me, I think the perfect dynamic within Call of Duty teams is always having like a shot caller. And I kind of come from like League of Legends in that sense, where that's obviously a really important role. And it's something I've always very, very valued, especially as, a previous competitive player myself, where like I felt like I fit that role. And that was something that was always a big value to me. I feel like RCDs is going to bring that now. And I don't think Crimsix is going to fill those shoes for Clayster. I think he's going to teach, the entire or all the players on that roster, the game, and he's going to be able to, show all that veteranship and that experience and being able to get them to that point. But will he be able to fill those shoes at Clayster? I don't think so. And that's why I think, this Atlanta FaZe squad is just going to be absolutely, relentless. And I really do think they're going to be insane this year.
I think that it's hard to outrule the fact that Dallas is defending a championship with 4 of the same 5 that are coming back.
Sure.
It's very
I would say
difficult.
1A, 1B.
Yeah, that's totally fair. But on the other front, because we haven't talked a lot about Chicago, if Dashy could turn this into a superstar year, I think Chicago could absolutely wind up on top. Scump and Envoy at the end of last year, I think were throwing their way around at the same, if not better level than what you had in Dallas, what you had in Atlanta. They played incredibly well in the last couple of weeks of the season, which is something that we did not see a lot from SMG lines, especially out of that Chicago SMG line. Vision, we talked about it all the time, that when you look at the SMG lines in the top 3, we considered heavily that Envoy and Scump were not putting out the same kind of production as you would anticipate from Simp and Abizi, and then as well from the core 3 of Zeo out there, XEO, whatever they pronounce it, when it comes to Dallas. But I will say, I felt like going from Black Ops 4 to Modern Warfare, a lot of the reason why Dashy was able to pop off was the fact that the Maddox was literally his weapon in Black Ops 4. There is not a better Maddox player in Black Ops 4 than Dashy. And I think if he could find a way to make his play style fit into this Cold War season, that this Chicago team absolutely could finish up on top. Because I think that what Scump and Envoy had at the end of this last year is going to translate into this next year. I think Formal being able to know that he's going to be the main AR player throughout all of the next year is going to be a very stable position for him. And I still feel like you guys mentioned, that the possibility of Clayster not being in Dallas could lead to some leadership questions. I don't think you're going to have those questions in Chicago. I do think there could be some consideration, like, will RCDs fill that role successfully in Atlanta? I think there might be a question mark at the end of that. I don't feel that way about Chicago in the same sense. So I think that there is something to be said. That all kind of coming and going, though, the long and short of it, I still think Atlanta on paper is probably going to be the best team next year.
I guess for me, outside of like Atlanta and Dallas being like 1A, 1B, I would probably put New York up there. I actually
Yeah.
really rate this squad.
You too.
Especially if Hydra's in the starting lineup. I think that you're just giving Clay another weapon to you know, weaponize and turn into the next like simp basically. And
Yeah.
the thing about Chicago shift is for me, like their highs can be really high with this team, I feel, but they
I
can
agree
also
with
their
you.
lows could be really, really low because you get rid of like the two other players that played on Chicago last year were Gunless and Arcedes. Two players that like were not afraid to like publicly speak that they want like more focus and stuff and scrims and want shit to change like their how they're playing and stuff. And now both those players are gone, and you bring in Dashy, who the year prior went on Optic with Scump and everything, was
That's
one of the
fair.
key factors in like causing a bunch of problems in scrims. So if things get down for this team, I don't want to say that they'll be completely screwed, but you'll see something like last year where it's going to be really hard for them to get out of that rut.
No,
And if
I
they
think you're right.
do, it's going to be with a roster change, in my
And
opinion.
that's why I sit there and say that, like, if Dashy has a superstar year next year, that
Yeah.
team will find itself near the top, if not at the top.
Well, it's not. I don't even think Dashy played bad last year. Or that like Huntsman. Even when Huntsman was placing like, what was it? They placed fourth or third, fourth at the Atlanta home series, and then the next home series, I believe they got third, fourth again, or something like that. But they didn't finish first in like 2 events, and that's when the turmoil started with Gunless. So I don't even think it's an issue of you need the superstar caliber play every single time from each of them. Because they're good enough to like, even if one of them's having an off day, they could still compete for a championship.
Agreed.
I think it's more so just about the attitudes and the mentality that they all have going into it.
No, I totally feel that. And that's, I mean, like, again, like, you go back to Optic Gaming after Vegas during Black Ops 4, like, the momentum that
Mhm.
team rode with, even though they still had to play with Zuma in the
Next
first
level.
weeks of CWO, was next level. And if they could find a way to maintain that off the back end of good individual performances, I think they could be at the high point. I will say this much, it's not a top 3 team, but I'm actually really excited to see this Minnesota Rocker team play, too.
Same.
I think that they have a
I wanna
lot of
see what their roles
potential
are gonna
where
be.
they could be really, that is the big question mark is what are the roles going to be? I think they could be a really, really strong team and a major competitor, but at the same point, I could also see them trending down, kind of like how the Rocker did this most last year too.
MW made people forget, man. Like they
Dude,
don't
Antler
remember that
sees next
attach
level,
was
man.
disgusting with
Yep.
the SMG. They don't remember that Priesta was Mr. Do It All before the M4 and stuff like that. Like this guy was grappling 10 feet in the air with a saw and shot punching you on the way down, and prior to that, running around with an STG and all that stuff. Like he can
Yep.
do it all. So any role you
Yeah.
put it in, I'm confident with Preston there.
Yeah.
So
I like that Minnesota
accuracy
team.
is a great leader, and yeah, I don't know. I think Mike also. People are gonna really sleep it on Mike. People think that he can
They
only play
always
main
do.
AR when he's probably gonna be. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being one of the better flexes in the league.
Yeah,
when
I
it's
mean,
all
he
said
was
and
he
done.
was an incredible Maddox player in Black Ops 4.
Mhm.
I mean, he was, again, the main AR for that Gen G team was Mox, so.
Yeah.
Final thoughts, though, from you guys. Let's go down the list, and we'll kind of wrap things here. As you guys, I know you have a meeting to go through with Breaking Point stuff. I didn't mention at the top, but Rab, again, congrats on all the success through the offseason so far. There's actually too long of a list of milestones to, like, list them all. So congrats on all that stuff, man. What are your kind of biggest takeaways? What are you most looking forward to this next year?
Yeah, thanks, man. It's been a fun couple of months, certainly. Honestly, it's been crazy. But yeah, I guess what I'm most looking forward to, firstly, some of the content Breaking Point are going to come up with over the next few weeks. Got some great ideas lined up. But also just for the next season to begin, because you don't get a track title every so often. The maps are a concern, as we've discussed, but the support from the developers this year, I think, is going to be telling, and I think we're going to have a much more structured season, especially because last year was the first season of franchising. There were some hiccups, especially going to online. And I believe we will have at least some LAN events this year, at least, that's in the works. They're hoping to do something like that. So a Treyarch title back on LAN, even if it is without spectators. Yeah, nothing sounds more exciting than that. And at some point, we're going to have fans back in the stadium, and those are going to be some of the best events we've ever seen. So yeah,
Can't
there's
wait.
some optimism on the horizon.
VisionZz, wrap us up, brother. Or Toronto Treasure.
Toronto Treasure. I'm honestly excited, man. I'm so hyped for this next year because I haven't played a Call of Duty in a long time where I felt like I could play for 12 hours and just grind things out. And I mean, it just feels like this is going to be a great year. Tony Flames tweeting out, during COD Champs, like, hey, like we're watching COD Champs, seeing what
Yeah.
we can do for next year, dude. Like that, I just like saw that and I was like, holy hell, I cannot wait, like what we're gonna get to see for this upcoming year. And I think that things are going back to 4v4. We're looking really, really good. I'm really excited for challengers and to see really what the COD League's looking to do around that whole platform with all these pros dropping down. And then the year coming up afterwards for as far as adding in expansion teams and how much pressure is going to be on some of these challenger players or previous CDO players to perform, to be able to have an opportunity to get themselves back towards the top. So honestly, I think there's a lot of excitement, and the COD League just came off of what was a pretty successful year despite all things considered. So I mean, yeah, the sky's the limit for next year, so I'm extremely excited.
Nick, I'm sure the buzz of the energy around Atlanta is probably at an all-time high right now. What are your final thoughts?
Yeah, man. More so just like outside of COD, excited to continue working with Atlanta Phase and getting started here soon on everything for 2021 with our like social media branding and stuff. What we're
Hell
gonna be
yeah.
doing. Growing Breaking Point. I really want to continue to like further what I'm gonna do behind the scenes for everyone on the team. I want to help everyone grow and make sure they have what they need to make good content and stuff that the community will enjoy.
Pumped about
In
it.
terms of in-game, just can't wait to tear it up with you guys in rank play. That's for sure.
Let's go, baby.
Let's go, baby.
Well, I don't know if
But
I'll
yeah,
be
thank you
tearing it up,
for
but I'll
thanks
be
for
there.
having me on for sure. Like, this was really fun.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a good
absolutely.
time.
Thanks again for all of you guys for being on for this one. Again, our first episode back for Off the Rip. We will be trying to do this every single week, hopefully on Tuesdays. So make sure you follow along with it. If you missed any of the show, we'll be uploading it to YouTube. And then my goal for the rest of the week is to try to find a way to get both this and the Diffuse up on all the major podcast supporters so you can listen to it at your own free will whenever you so choose. So it's going to wrap things up, though, for the first one. Till the next time, though, hope you guys out there keep holding it down. So long. Bye-bye.